Good morning, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. Council is conducting this meeting in person and via conference call in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, Section 199. Council chambers is open for public attendance. However, councillors and members of the public may still join meetings remotely using our current teleconference process. If you've submitted a comment request, the chair will call on you at the appropriate time. The chair may also ask for comments and concerns from the public relating to a particular topic. And at this time, phone lines will be unmuted. If you would like to speak, please state your name. We ask that only one member of the public speak at a time. All persons will be allotted 10 minutes to speak as per our procedural bylaw. We ask that if the meeting recesses, any callers hang up and call back in as the meeting reconvenes. This helps with call quality. Please note this meeting is being recorded and may be uploaded to our website and/or social media. To eliminate background noise, please mute your phone during the meeting. We also ask all attendees to mute their devices to reduce disruptions to the meeting. Everyone has a right to be present at council meetings and council committee meetings. Any attendees that are considered disruptive to the progression of this meeting may be removed at the discretion of the chair as per the MGA Section 198. We thank you for your cooperation and understanding. We have an agenda before us. Does anybody have any additions or changes?
Good morning, Reeve Link, Brian from Administration. Administration has one addition for Council's consideration to the agenda today. It would be provincial advocacy for an interchange. And we propose to add that item to an in-camera item under agenda item 6. Thank you.
Perfect. And just for the public, that's under VoIP section 24. Any other additions or changes?
I'll move the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We had the minutes from the regular council meeting of June 20th. Any errors or omissions?
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Thanks, Deputy Reeve Clausen. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We also had the minutes from our public hearing from June 20th. Any errors or omissions?
If there are none, I'll move the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.11, bylaw 2023-06. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Reeve and Council.
Just through the Reeve, this one would be a public hearing, so you'd want to do the process for the public hearing.
Thank you. My apologies, everybody. I move that the process for the Wheatland County Council meeting, as it pertains to the scheduled public hearing, will be as follows. Public hearing, first reading if required, then consideration for further readings of bylaw for those public hearings that have been closed. I further move that the above process will take place with the absence of resolutions to go into and out of council before and after each public hearing. All in favor? Motion is carried. I'd like to call the public hearing to order. Welcome, everybody. Does any member of the public have an objection to any councillor sitting on council for the public hearing? And can administration please verify that notice of the public hearing was circulated in accordance with the MGA?
Yes, notice of the public hearing was circulated in accordance with the Act. Responses received by the county can be found on page 26 of the agenda package. However, administration did receive 3 additional statements of support, which didn't make it into the agenda package before it was published. 2 copies were received by the deadline and 1 submission was late. I have copies of the comments if council wishes to accept them, and I'm happy to read them into the record if you'd like as well.
I think it would be prudent to read them in, and if we can show them on the display as well, just so that they're part of the record of the public hearing, please. Now, typically we don't read into the record those that were received after the deadline. Is that accurate, just for consistency?
Through the Reeve to council, it's council's wishes. If you accept them late, then we would read them into the record.
What's council's wishes? Councillor Kester.
I would like to have them accepted. You want that a motion?
We should have a
I'll
motion.
make that a motion then.
Okay, there's a motion to accept the late correspondence. Any questions or discussion? My only hesitancy is just around consistency. I believe for previous hearings, we have had correspondence received after the deadline that we did not read into the record. I don't know if administration can speak to that.
Through the relief to council, they have been read into the record.
Oh, have
And then
they?
other
Okay.
times, the last one, it was put on the overhead so that the public could read them and they were not read.
Okay. As long as we're being consistent, I'm good with it. Now, does council prefer, and I do recall that it wasn't read, they were just placed on. What's council's preference? Would you rather it just be displayed or that administration reads them aloud? They're not overly, these ones are not overly long.
There's not a lot of them. There's a motion. Read them in.
Okay. Councillor Kester, your motion was to read them in as well as display them, accept them.
The other one too.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
So I'll read these in the order they were received. This is from Carrie Eliuk on Wednesday, June 28th. Hi, Taylor. I just wanted to let you know that we're in full support of this project and would be happy to see the fulfillment of any formalities necessary for its completion. We believe that anything that will draw visitors to Rosebud will be an asset to all of us and hope that the county agrees. Thank you. Thanks, Carrie and Corey Eliuk. The second submission was received by Laverne Erickson on Tuesday, June 27th. Sorry, I should have read this first. Taylor, Council, and MPC, thank you for your due diligence. This mixed-use redesignation will add immensely to Rosebud community. And as a neighbor of the applicant, I'm wholly supportive. Okay. Sorry, just one moment. We'll bring it up on the screen here. Should be. Rosebud is the only Wheatland County hamlet with an internationally known brand name tourism-based economy. This land use redesignation provides for more needed guest accommodation and above all, another tourist attraction with roots in historic prairie development and transportation. Sincerely, Laverne Erickson, travel industry and Alberta ambassador. And the last submission here was received by Margaret Van Dyke on Sunday, July 2nd. Dear Taylor Felt, my apologies for not writing you by the June 28th deadline. I hope my comments can still be included in the records as the council considers a redesignation application. Stanley and Charlotte Regal deserve the support and encouraged in their application for redesignation to allow a mixed-use building on Martin Ave, Rosebud. As I understand, the building will house a model train exhibit on the main floor, which will offer much enjoyment to Rosebud's many visitors, as well as a residential suite on the second floor, which will help alleviate the severe housing shortage experienced in the hamlet. I have no doubt that their venue will improve Rosebud for residents and visitors alike. There's a good precedent for a mixed-use development on Martin Ave, since the street is already an exciting blend of residential and commercial spaces. Directly east to the Regal property is the combined residence/business formerly known as the Thorny Rose Cafe. The cafe is located in front, the residence in the back of the building. Next to that is an outdoor stage, then the Rosebud Theatre Opera House, followed by the Kith and Kin Bed and Breakfast and Gift Shop. To the west of the Regal property are two residences, followed by the Okonkinsway Art Gallery and three more residences. Given the layout of Martin Ave, the addition of a mixed-use facility makes perfect sense. Stanley and Charlotte Regal deserve the support and encouraged in their venture. Their good cheer and community contributions are second to none. I urge the county to approve the Regals application and do everything in your power to smooth the way forward. Respectfully yours, Margaret Van Dyke. That concludes the submissions.
Thank you.
So Taylor Felt here with the county's Planning and Development Services team to present bylaw 2023-06 for council's consideration of second and third reading. The application proposes to redesignate the subject lot from Hamlet Commercial District to Hamlet Mixed Use District in order to facilitate the development of an existing dwelling into a mixed-use building, which will accommodate commercial uses on the main floor and residential uses on the upper floor. The application, it can be found at the subject site, which is 230 Martin Avenue in the hamlet of Rosebud. The applicant is a train enthusiast, which ties directly into his development proposal, as the applicant seeks to display model trains for public viewing with supporting retail uses on the main floor. The residential component will include a secondary suite for short and long-term accommodations on the second floor. Redesignating the lot is required as a mixed-use building is not a listed use in the Hamlet Commercial District, but is a discretionary use in the Hamlet Mixed Use District. The subject lands are located within the Rosebud Area Structure Plan and within an area the ASP considers suitable for mixed-use development, with many neighboring examples, as was noted in the submissions received, of mixed-use developments along Main Street and Martin Avenue. The proposal aligns with the Municipal Development Plan's policies for tourism and community-oriented commercial development. Several policies within the ASP require redesignation applications for mixed uses to include an environmental site assessment and stormwater management plan in support of the proposal. These studies are required to identify potential environmental impacts new development may have on the receiving environment. In this case, however, there is little benefit in undertaking these studies as the application does not propose any new construction, but rather the adaptive reuse of an existing dwelling. And as such, it's anticipated that the impacts of the development on the lot will be minimal. Stakeholders and landowners within a 500-meter radius were notified of the application prior to first reading and again in advance of today's public hearing. And for context, you can see on the screen here, this circulation included all landowners within the hamlet area. Comments received prior to first reading begin on page 26 of the agenda package, and we've read in the 3 additional comments for the public hearing into the public record. And all of the comments received by administration are in support of the application. There were no objections received by county staff. And with that, administration is making the recommendation that council grant second and third reading of bylaw 2023-06. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions regarding administration's presentation? Does the applicant wish to speak? Do any persons in support of the application wish to speak? Or anyone online in support of the application? Are there any persons with concerns or who are opposed to the application who would like to speak? And does staff have any final comments?
No.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the applicant, and I will close the public hearing for bylaw 2023-06. Council's wishes.
I'll move second reading.
Close the hearing first, I think.
I think she did.
I did close the public hearing. Thank you. So the recommended motion from administration, Councillor Custer?
Yes, I move second reading of bylaw 2023-06.
Perfect. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Councillor Larson. Oh,
I'll move
Councillor Larson.
that council move third reading of bylaw 2023-06, this being a bylaw for the purpose of amending land use bylaw number 2016-01 to redesignate lot 15, block 4, plan 5272CG from Hamlet Commercial District to Hamlet Mixed Use District as shown on the attached Schedule A forming part of this bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor Larson. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.12, bylaw 2022-28.
Good morning, Council. Sherry Bars with administration to present bylaws 2022-28 and 2022-29 for consideration of first readings and to request that Council schedule public hearings for each on August 15, 2023.
Council's wishes. Or were you going to do a presentation? Sorry.
Unless you don't want me to.
No, we can. My apologies.
And it's okay. So bylaw 2022-28 is to amend the West Highway 1 area structure plan by making textual amendments, revising figures and maps, and appending the de Havilland Field area concept plan in order to facilitate the development of an aircraft manufacturing facility with associated industrial and commercial uses. Bylaw 2022-29 proposes to redesignate the subject lands from Agricultural General District to Direct Control District. Consideration of these bylaws should be undertaken concurrently as first reading for bylaw 2022-29 for the land use redesignation is dependent on council granting first reading of bylaw 2022-28 for the area structure plan amendment. I'll provide a brief overview of the applications for first reading with more detail to be provided at the public hearing. The subject lands as shown on the location map are found on page 147 of the agenda package and are approximately 1,557.92 acres in size and located within sections 5, 24, 26 west of the 4th meridian, Section 8, 24, 26 west of the 4th meridian, north half of 9, 24, 26 west of the 4th meridian, and south half of 17, 24, 26 of the west of the 4th meridian. The lands are approximately 11 kilometers or 6.84 miles west of the town of Strathmore, located on both sides of the Highway 1. The lands to the south of the highway are bounded by Range Road 263 to the east, Range Road 265 to the west, Township Road 240 to the south, and Origin Business Park Phase 2 to the north. The lands immediately north of the highway are located between Range Roads 264 and 265. The plan area consists of cultivated agricultural lands with intermittent water courses, ephemeral water bodies, and marshes distributed throughout the area. The surrounding land uses are designated for industrial uses with some agricultural and residential parcels located to the south and to the northeast. As the lands are partially located within the boundaries of the West Highway 1 area structure plan, further development of industrial and commercial uses is anticipated in the future. The developer, de Havilland Aircraft of Canada, is proposing to construct an aircraft manufacturing facility, which will consist of an aircraft assembly facility, parts manufacturing and distribution center, manufacturing, repair, and overhaul facility, a runway, and associated commercial and industrial uses. It is anticipated that once in full operation, 1,500 jobs will be created. The applicant submitted an area concept plan that provides the planning policy framework to guide the development of the project, and it provides information and policies on how the subject lands will be developed and serviced. The plan area is divided into 3 development cells that proposes to group compatible and complementary uses together. Each cell will develop in phases to allow for incremental construction of infrastructure, with Cell 1 developing first as the main anchor for the de Havilland Aircraft Company. Phase 1 within Cell 1, containing the first portion of the aerodrome and stormwater infrastructure, will be developed first. The remaining phases within Cell 1 will see the completion of the aerodrome and associated aerospace facility and businesses. The layout of Cell 1 was determined by the length and orientation of the runway to ensure safe landing and takeoff of aircrafts. The northern half of the runway is proposed to be constructed first, with the aerodrome located in the northeastern portion of the cell. Other aviation aerospace companies are proposed to be situated in the southeast and west portions of the cell, where they can take advantage of access to the runway. Cells 2 and 3 propose to accommodate uses such as offices, warehouses, manufacturers, distributors, commercial uses such as gas stations, convenience stores, hotels, and restaurants. These uses are proposed in this area to take advantage of the close proximity to the Trans-Canada Highway. The development of cells 2 and 3 will be based on market demand and the development timing within Cell 1. The proposed aerodrome uses are currently not available in an existing district of the county's land use bylaw. Therefore, a direct control district, bylaw 2022-29, consisting of 3 cells, is being proposed to allow direct control by council over the development of the aerodrome, industrial uses, and supporting commercial uses. The direct control district includes definitions, general regulations, site regulations, and special requirements that align with the de Havilland Field Area Concept Plan. A traffic impact assessment was submitted in support of the application, which examined the potential impact of the proposed development would have on the transportation network. All scenarios of the TIA included the development of a grade-separated interchange at the intersection of Highway 1 and Range Road 264. The main access for cells 1 and 2 will be from Range Road 264, which is anticipated to function as a high-volume arterial road, providing multiple site locations. Cell 3 will be accessed from Range Roads 264 and 265. A service study was conducted, which reviewed various methods to provide water and wastewater servicing. The servicing study demonstrated that there were several viable options to service the proposed development, with the ultimate servicing method to be determined at the subdivision or development permit stage. The area concept plan includes policies, including the interim servicing solutions that may be implemented during the initial phases of the development until an ultimate water and wastewater servicing systems are constructed to serve the plan area. A conceptual stormwater management report was completed, which confirmed that the area can be serviced by a comprehensive integrated stormwater management system that uses evaporation, irrigation, and mechanical evaporation. The final method of stormwater will be determined at the subdivision and/or development permit stage. In order to facilitate the proposed de Havilland Field development, the applicant has proposed amendments to the West Highway 1 area structure plan. The table found on page 33 lists the textual amendments and map updates being proposed to facilitate the development, with the most notable amendments proposing to expand the existing area structure plan boundary to include the additional 1,557.92 acres of land located within sections 5, 8, 9, and 17, 24, 26 west of the 4th meridian, and to append the de Havilland Field Area Concept Plan as Appendix D to the area structure plan. The proposed area structure plan amendments and direct control redesignation proposal generally aligns with the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, the county's Regional Growth Management Strategy, the Municipal Development Plan, and the West Highway 1 area structure plan, and the land use bylaw. The applications meet the goals and objectives of the county's higher level plans, such as the guiding principles of the MDP for economic growth and the promotion of economic opportunities. The de Havilland Field development proposal is consistent with this principle as it allows for the establishment of a business that operates on a local, regional, national, and international scale, provides economic diversification and job creation, and embraces the opportunity presented by the regional transportation network. There are no technical concerns regarding servicing or access to the lands. As such, administration recommends that council grant first reading of bylaws 2022-28 and 2022-29 and schedule a public hearing for August 15th, 2023. And I'll bring up first bylaw 2022-28 with the motions for council's consideration. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council move first reading of bylaw 2022-28, this being a bylaw for the purpose of amending the West Highway 1 area structure plan, bylaw number 2006-05, by making textual amendments and revising figures and maps as shown on the attached Schedule A and appending the de Havilland Field area concept plan as shown on the attached Schedule B.
Thank you, Councillor Eckert. Any questions or discussion?
This is strictly showboating, but just to prove that I pay attention, on page 73 of the of our agenda, the map is, there's the road numbers are, and I don't think it makes any difference, but the road numbers, there's 253 is in the wrong location. That's 255. And that's the only thing I get, but I did notice that. So up on the top goes from 260 to 253 to 254, and then 253 is actually at the very, very top of the map. So I don't know if it makes any difference, but I thought I'd bring it up.
It's not showboating, it's attention to detail. And we appreciate it. We appreciate it. No, that is a good catch. Just wondering in terms of process, let me just look what that's part of. That's the amendment to the West Highway 1 ASP, right?
I'm not sure if that wasn't actually a map that was in the presentations that they did in the area.
Through the Reeve to council, Eckert, this is a map prepared by the applicant that will be replaced in the area structure plan, so we can make that amendment now to correct it so that when we come back for public, if we correct it now, it'll just be come back in the correct version of the area structure plan for the public hearing.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve as presented. Should we amend that motion to include the amendment?
Yes, please. So
I will
Add an amendment
Add
as
in-
amended.
to correct the map,
correct the map.
map A within the area structure plan,
Yes,
West Highway 1 area structure plan.
amendment of.
Perfect. Yeah, it's best that we do it now. Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? So just for clarity, the motion will be as recommended on page 30, but we'll just be adding as amended for that map A as discussed, just so everybody's clear. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll move that a public hearing by bylaw 2022-28 be scheduled for August 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in Wheatland County Council chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 2.13.
Good morning, Council. I presented bylaw 2022-29 along with bylaw 2022-28 and the motions for bylaw 25-29 are on the screen for your consideration.
Council's wishes.
I'll move that council move first reading of bylaw 2022-29, this being a bylaw for the purpose of amending land use bylaw number 2016-01 to redesignate plus or minus 1,557.92 acres within section 5, 2426 west of the 4th, section 8, 2426 west of the 4th, the north half of 9, 2426 west of the 4th, and the south half of 17, 2426 west of the 4th, from Agriculture General District to Direct Control District as shown on the attached Schedule A.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll move that a public hearing for bylaw 2022-29 be scheduled for August 15th, 2023 at 9 a.m. in Wheatland County Council Chambers.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.1. My report can be found on page 298 of the agenda package. Just a couple of things I'll highlight. I was grateful for the meeting that we had with the WID board. I think it was good to meet their new board members and discuss some of the ways that we may be able to work together and synergies between our two organizations going forward. Also appreciated the meeting with the town of Drumheller Council and CAO. Again, it's just really good, I think, to establish those relationships with our adjacent municipalities and our neighbors. The meeting with Mayor Gontek and her City of Calgary administration went well. Our administration, you would have read further on in the package, is working on the formal request to access servicing within the City of Calgary and just establishing the requirements associated with that request. But the meeting went very well. It was very promising. I was asked to judge the Strathmore Stampede Rodeo Queen public speaking, and that was a lot of fun. There were some strong contestants, one local, and a couple of contestants from outside of this region. Really just incredible to see the amount of work that goes in to the Rodeo Queen contest, and congratulations to the contestant that won. They will be shadowing the current queen just up until rodeo weekend, and it's like just an incredible thing watching everything that goes into that and what ambassadors they are for this region at rodeos all across Alberta. And I think actually the former queen has even traveled outside of Alberta and Canada, showcasing our region. So that was a lot of fun. More fun than the safety audit interview. Couple of meetings with potential, more formal meetings with potential investors and regarding investment attraction. Still a lot of interest in Wheatland County, and I don't necessarily document the less formal interactions, but those went very well. The Legacy Farm open house was also really exciting. I think the project in the town of Strathmore is phenomenal for the town, but also really good for this region, and very much ties into the roots of Wheatland County and the Agricultural Foundation. And I'll just share as well, we had the first meeting of the Movers and Shakers Walking Group. It's a group for women entrepreneurs in this region that Community Futures Administration facilitated and initiated. And I think it'll just be a good opportunity for people to connect and share best practices and challenges and celebrate, wins and that type of thing. So it was great to be there. With that, I will move approval of my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. All in favor? Motion is carried. Move to agenda item 3.2. Deputy Reeves report.
Thank you. My report has been printed off and is sitting at everybody's desk. The meetings that we had with Drumheller, and I forgot about WFD, they were all very productive, like you said. Had a couple of Southern Alberta Energy from Waste meetings. We're still, the vendor has another project in the world that they're working on. They had some problems with it, so they're hopefully get some good answers here in the next month or two. There was some funding that we applied for to facilitate some work that we needed done, and we did not get the grant, but Newell County stepped up and the City of Brooks stepped up and provided us some funding to keep going. And then 28th and 29th, I listened to the LPRT development appeal just as a silent observer, because I find I learn something through those every time we go, and what an expert is, and what, you know, it's interesting to hear what is defined as expert for areas, but we'll see. I think it's 21st is the appeal decision date. They have until then. And yeah, if not, if you have any questions, if not, I'll move my report as presented.
Thanks, Deputy Reed Clausen. Any questions?
And just any progress, like you attended the SAWA board meeting via Zoom. Is there any progress on, like, how is that? I know there was money involved so that the next step can go on, but like, so when will there be a decision made that whether or not, like, I would assume from what I remember that going forward, the next step is to find out if we can, how much waste that we have to get a sort of a guarantee, find out how much waste is in there. So when does that start to happen?
It's kind of a few things that have to happen. One is to have an estimated price range from the vendor to what tonnage costs are going to be. And that'll be a sliding scale depending on how much, designed from 300,000 ton down to 150,000 ton per year. And then from that, I believe within the next 6 months, once we have that document, we can go around and get a letter of intent from the municipalities to commit their waste. And there'll be some exit clauses on there as well for everybody, so for comfort levels. But the most important thing is to get that, what the cost is going to be, cost and transportation as well. So.
Thank you.
So if I understand correctly, you're hoping to present like the cost based on different volume amounts. It would be a sliding scale depending on how much commitment you get at the beginning, and then that could vary throughout the project.
The ultimate efficiency is 300,000 ton per year, but it can go down to 100. We have basically commitment from previous commitment for about 150,000 ton from the area. That information is now about 6 years old. So we have to go back. There's been interest from some of the larger municipalities now. So, but it's all on dollars and cents, right? It's just no different than what we deal here.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.3.
My report is on page 301 of the package. A couple of things I'll highlight. So the Chamber of Commerce trade show, we did a debrief on it after the event on May 28th. I would call it a moderate success. We've identified a few issues with the format of the trade show. Number one is the weekend chosen is a grad weekend, so people are generally quite busy with other things going on. We held it this time instead of Saturday and Sunday. We wanted a one-day event. We chose Sunday, which wasn't ideal as well. I think the facility that we've been holding it at doesn't have a very good frontage where you know that something's happening there, and it's really difficult to advertise what's happening. So I think we are considering a new format for next year. Number one, obviously, different weekend. We're thinking about having it maybe at the ag grounds instead, having an indoor-outdoor component to it, and also maybe making it more of a community and family event, some kinds of events that families can participate in to make it more of a full community kind of an event with the business part of it as well. But just trying to change it up to see if we can't get more participants and people coming to as guests. So we will, start working on that, changing it up and making it better. So that's good. Our next event coming up is the Strathmore Stampede Parade. So working to get that organized and participants signed up. So that's always a great event. So I'm not worried about that one. I attended two webinars that the Alberta Seniors and Community Housing Association put on about governance, which is timely, and they were great, actually. They were really informative and had great ideas about what a high-performance board looks like, and sort of talked about the importance of remaining curious, encouraging dissenting voices so that you can get a good conversation going, a respectful dialogue, keeping open-minded, that it's important to have educational sessions for the whole board so that you all kind of have a joint understanding of the industry and of what's going on. Talked about issues with groupthink when everybody kind of tends to think the same, and that where things kind of are unanimously agreed all the time, that's not necessarily a good thing. They talked about overcommitted board members who don't have time to really get a really great understanding of what the industry and the board might be looking at, and the importance of succession planning, not always having the same people, that it is good to have turnover. It's good to have term limits on a board. Talked about onboarding and the importance of mentoring new board members, and I think all of those things are just such great advice for any board. So that was hugely valuable to go to. The other thing I want to point out, WFCSS, the Alberta government has announced $5 million in additional funding for FCSSs in Alberta. So that means an additional $30,800 over 3 years for our WFCSS. So that does mean that because there's an 80-20 partnership in terms of funding between the province and the partner municipalities, there will be an additional invoice coming to Wheatland County to match that from our point of view. So that's, I guess, all I'll highlight for now. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I'll move my report for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions? Just for clarity, for the WFCSS funding, that's $30,000 for each of the 3 years?
No,
Or that's spread out?
Spread out over the
Okay.
3 years, yes. Yep.
So it was a one-time $5 million.
They do their funding for a 3-year period, and so that's, yes. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
Just on follow up on that question, there's about how much is the new invoice going to be? Just what's that?
It's a
You're gonna make me do
funny
math on the
formula.
spot? Yeah.
If it's 30,000, it's going to be around
I just need to know. Like just
$2,000 a year,
oh, so it's not very much.
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
because the province pays 80,
So
and then we
20%
pay
of
20.
30
But you
divided by
kind of,
3, and then, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, right,
I
right.
just didn't know which way the 80 was. So now we're
The
only.
Oh.
province is the predominant funder.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then at times municipalities, including Wheatland, have done like more than our required contribution, depending on need and that type of thing. So, but thank you for the heads up. Any other questions? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.4.
Yeah, my report is on paper. I too enjoyed the WOD meeting. I think it's important that we start collaborating with each other. And the Legacy Farm, what a great project that is. It's so much history around this area that, I mean, even my past job, I mentioned how much history Strathmore had. And with forming this this province and area. The open house at Wheatland, the Wheatland County Open House at Cluny. I have wanted to make a suggestion that we bring, this is not my idea, I just heard it, but I liked it, was having a couple open houses a year, probably maybe one in the east and then one in the west, and just having more community information given. I still like the open house. I still think, you know, they don't have to look all the same, but I think we should, because it could be 7 years before you get around to that area again. I like the back and forth. Since there's different problems on one end and different problems on the other, maybe we could bring it back to a committee of the whole, or just do a motion after my report, either way. But I did like that idea, and I can't remember who said it, but it was a good one. And yeah, I'll move to have my report accepted.
Any questions for Councillor Bigger? I do like your comments around the open house. I've been just chatting with other colleagues around rural Alberta and just how they do in-person public engagement, and a lot of municipalities are moving towards smaller events, like you said, in different, if they are by division, coffee with a councillor or that type, there's multiple names for it, but smaller, less formal type engagement opportunities, but like you said, closer to in different locations, so it's easier for people to access. Yeah. Just because as rural municipalities, we're so geographically vast. So I would love to see that come back to committee of the whole just for further discussion. Perhaps after your motion to approve your report, you could just request to add it to the next committee of the whole agenda.
Sure.
But I do like that idea, and I like the discussion. I appreciated everybody that came out for the committee of the whole, or for the open house in Cluny. I think it was quite focused on one specific issue, which sometimes I think, I hope there was a few people there that were not there specifically for that issue. And I think that can be a little bit challenging just because they had different questions that there maybe wasn't an opportunity to address with the direction that the meeting took. But it is important to have those dialogues and to hear about those issues, and that was a good opportunity to do so. So grateful for everybody who engaged. Any other questions or discussion? Councillor Bigger, you moved to approve your report, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes, I see that you did. All in favor? Motion is carried.
So I'll also move that Wheatland County open houses discussion be brought back to the community of the whole meeting.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.5.
Excuse me, I was negligent in getting my report, but I got it printed off. You have a copy of it on your desk. I think everything has been pretty well touched. I just want to reiterate the webinar from ASHA, the Governance Trends and Best Practices. It was recorded. I think it's on the ASHA site. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, but I think you have to be a member to access it. It's under their members only. But I can find out if we can share it amongst ourselves. Maybe.
Because it is really, really good. Like they have the PowerPoint presentation on it was excellent. So yeah, other than that, I think everything else has been covered. So I will move my report. Any questions?
Just one question. I'm wondering if we could actually just based on both of your comments about the webinar and the potential project in the region. I'm wondering, because I wonder if we are like indirectly, like WHMB would be a member of ASHA, and because we, like each of the municipalities, are members, I'm just wondering if we could like make a council motion to like formally ask ASHA if it might be possible, and not just for Wheatland, but for any of the councillors on any of the municipal councils that are members of WHMB,
To make it,
to make those webinars available for us to review.
I will make that after, oh, I guess I have to move my, and then,
Right, after your report. I'm just wondering, I just think it could be, and like governance training is good. And when you have good governance training, it can be helpful for that board, but also for even council or other boards that we sit on, that type of thing. Okay, awesome. Well, we'll discuss your report first and stay on track. Councillor Eichert has moved to approve his report. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll make a motion that council request ASHA to make that their webinar on governance trends and best practices available, and that it be sent out to, and a letter be sent out to all the members of Wheatland Housing Management Board. Does that work?
So there were 2 webinars. Let me just see.
Yeah, there was one on the
think it was-
28th and I missed that.
Yeah, and it was good too. It was called, so the first one was called Governance Trends and Best Practices. The second one was called Building High Performance Boards, a Deeper Dive.
So
Get both of those.
both those
Okay,
governance trends and building better boards.
okay. And I just wonder about, just for wording of your motion, if we might just consider a minor amendment instead of request, just to inquire if it's possible. ASHA may have some like guidelines on how things are available, or it may be only available to to housing board. Like, I'm just not sure what they're.
When they first, on the first meeting, it sounded like they wanted to make it available to, it didn't sound like it was going to be a problem to.
And they have
Make it-
open training previously to a wider
Right.
audience. Okay, perfect. No, that's great. Any questions on the motion?
A clarification on the motion. So Tom, are you going to, you said council will request, are we asking administration to do it, or are you going to,
We could send a letter
Yeah, I was-
from the Reeve to
from the Reeve? Okay, very good,
Yeah,
to
that's-
ASHA, would it be? to-
Yeah, I think so, yes.
very good.
Yes, absolutely. Nope. So that, do you want me to take a stab?
Take a stab.
That Councillor Eichert moved to direct administration to draft a letter from the Reeve to ASHA requesting access to the webinars, governance trends and best practices, as well as the webinar Building High Performance Boards, a Deeper Dive, and inquiring if they could be available to the municipal councils of the municipalities that are members of the Wheatland Housing Management Body.
That's
Is
it,
that-
perfect.
Is that, that's what I thought I heard you say? Word for word. Councillor Kester, is that good?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. And thanks for bringing that forward. We'll move to agenda item 3.6.
I didn't get my. There, nobody had tell them my report. So on the 6th, I went to council. We had curb pictures that day and a WID meeting that day, and also the town of Drumheller. The 13th, I attended the MPC. And on the 15th, we had a WHMB joint meeting at Strathmore Municipal Office. On the 20th, we had council, then we had code of conduct training, and then the county open house at Clooney. And I also listened to the development appeal. I find that interesting and informative. You don't have to go to every meeting and be able to open your mouth and speak. It's best to listen at times too. Yeah, so if there's no questions, I'll move my report as spoken.
Thank you, Councillor Kester. Any questions? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 3.7.
So my report's on page 306. Most of this stuff has been covered by other councillors already. I'll just say that on the June 15th Drumheller and District Solid Waste Management Association meeting, we presented our strategic plan. It went well. And we also did a strategic plan presentation on the June 19th WDEMSA meeting, which also was received well. And then I attended on June 21st the Drumheller and Area Health Foundation as a committee member. I was appointed to the Personnel Committee. And if council wants updates from those meetings, then I would ask that we have a motion to ratify my position on that board for the benefit of Wheatland County and its residents, which I will do after I move that my report be accepted as presented unless there's questions.
So you're moving approval of your report?
Correct.
Any questions or discussion for Councillor Laursen?
Just notice there's 3 meetings for the Wheatland Housing Management Board building meeting. What is discussed in there and what can be discussed?
Those meetings are meetings of the building committee, which I've been appointed to. So we're going into design things and what keeping our costs in line and getting approval for, or getting ready to get approval for government funding.
Any other questions or discussion for Councillor Laursen? All in favor? Motion is carried.
Then I would ask for a motion to ratify my position on the Drumheller and Area Health Foundation for the benefit of Wheatland County and its residents.
Thank you, Councillor Laursen. Any questions or discussion?
Just how often does this group meet?
It meets about 8 times a year. So monthly, but it takes the summer off.
Any other questions or discussion, Councillor?
Like, is this, have we been on this before? We had someone on it, right?
Ben was on it before.
And I don't remember it being on the organizational.
I think we have discussed this a couple of times in council. I think Councillor Armstrong attended, I think, as a community member, as a volunteer. We do have other community members that also volunteer and represent Wheatland County. I believe we have Mary Marshman currently also representing Wheatland County. Previously, when this was discussed, it was not added as a council committee or council board. At our last, during our last discussion, I do not recall if there was a motion regarding this. I can't recall.
Sorry, and administration can't recall just off the top of my head. If council gave time, we could look into it.
Okay. I have like some memory of a motion, but I could be wrong.
I would like to see this revisited at the organizational time. So just to see what kind of bang for the buck we're going to get from this. So.
Yeah, I would support that, considering it at our organizational meeting. I won't support the motion at this time, just based on the same rationale I've shared during other discussions. While we do, health certainly does impact Wheatland County and our, certainly rural Alberta, and the Drumheller and Area Health Foundation does critically important work. I do see this somewhat outside our municipal scope and where we as municipal councillors like just the necessity of having a Wheatland County like specific representative there. I do absolutely appreciate those that serve on the board and represent the region. Also, I think all of us do sit on certain different boards and committees in a volunteer capacity without remuneration. And that's important work as well, just to serve as community members. Yeah, any other questions or discussion? Councillor Kester.
Councillor Eichert asked for more information. I was hoping he could be more specific on what he would want, what the size of the organization is, how big is it taken in, and like what are you looking for information? Just
Well, I'm trying to figure out how much this is going to cost the county, first of all, like have an idea what the remuneration is expected, the amount that this is going to cost and all that kind of stuff, whether or not it's worth we have representation, but you know, that's just me.
well, 8 meetings times per diem, that's pretty easy to figure out right now. You want to know, like Nehill County, they're a member, but they also built their own health center. I mean, what does council want to see? Is it just remuneration for that, or the benefits to the community? Like, do we want council from Drumheller to come tell us how important it is for them and how they work at it as a council and as a community? I had an interesting talk when we had our visitors here from Drumheller and what they do and what they perceive. Wheatland County is the second largest by population that go to that hospital. It's not the same hospital as what Strathmore has. They like do surgeries, and in Drumheller, it's more of a regional hospital. So I'm just curious what kind of presentation you want. Is it just remuneration? Or do you want to have a fulsome? Do you want the organization to come and fill everybody in on what they do?
I'm just basically, I will be voting against this motion. I just didn't want it to die on the vine and that it would come back at an organizational meeting.
Any other questions?
I'm-
Clausen.
I think it'd be appropriate to have the Drumheller Area Health Foundation have a representative here to ask for an appointment of a board member with all that information there as to what they do, what they have, the benefits of. I'm just thinking in comparison with Strathmore, I'm sure there's something there and none of us have anything to do with that. I've never even heard of an ask. But my health is your MLA's wheelhouse really. And I'm not saying this doesn't have benefits, but it's generally the provincial jurisdiction. So I just like them to have the ask to us, and then they can give us a package on what is there. It's been talked about a few times, and I think it's good to have for us to make the decision. And generally, from what I've seen sitting here, is when we appoint somebody, it's that organizational time, and you make like a business case or whatever. There's quite a few things that I sit on too that I don't charge that has great benefit to the county. But and I realize expenses are high with traveling right now, so definitely needs like a business case for me.
Any other questions or discussion?
I guess my concern is with, we were asked if one of the counselors could be on the handy bus, and we kind of didn't do that. And the reasoning that was mine there is the same as this one. We are on, I think the less boards that we're on, sometimes it's actually more beneficial that they report to us rather than us sitting in on it. And it's hard to explain. I just think we need less involvement in some of the community boards. Have less governance in it. But that was just my opinion.
I guess I'd be curious about what the role specifically, I mean, it's governance, but so, yeah, I guess I'd just like more information about why it would be important for somebody on council to sit on it.
Just to throw in one of them more. every time we go to an RMA convention, we always listening how the municipalities have to get involved to attract doctors to their regions and what they can do to help out. We know in Strathmore, we've lost a lot of doctors. People don't have family doctors anymore. What can you do to, I know Nehill built a clinic. I also recognized here, or we think I seen a news release that they're dropping all taxation on the clinic. They're really looking for doctors up there. How do you attract doctors? Is it a well-staffed hospital? Is it equipment in the hospital, CT scans, everything like that? This isn't just per diems, right? This is important to the community, especially as the community. That's all I'm going to say. I'll wait till organizational.
And I'll just say that this is a foundation. It's not run by Alberta Health Services. This is an independent foundation that raises money. We just passed a motion on the last one to buy some equipment for the hospital that Alberta Health Services has refused to supply to make it better for the care of the people that are in there. And you can vote however you want. I'll continue to go to it. I just won't provide updates to you.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note that we can certainly be involved in other service and other activities that certainly benefit this region. I think part of it is also just we do need to watch costs. We've been very focused on fiscal efficiency as part of our strategic goal to try and maintain or lower our tax rates. I think like in this June report, for Councillor Laverson, I think there's 7 WHMB meetings, including building committee meetings. Depending on when those were, that could be over $1,300 in per diems if they were evening meetings at the partial meeting rate. And so I know we've deliberated on, donations to the foundation and that type of thing. I'm mindful of tax dollars that we're stewarding and how we spend them. And if those per diems could be shifted into support to some of that equipment that might attract physicians. Councillor Custer, I definitely agree with you. And those were really good points around municipalities do play that role. And I certainly see that through RPAP committees. That's a pretty clear focus on like municipally driven support to attract those doctors. I don't think the foundation has been municipally driven. I think there's a lot of community members. They do, and this, I want to be clear that I recognize the significance of the work that the foundation does. It is critical, and I do agree it certainly would play a role in attraction and retention of healthcare professionals. I do support the idea of examining this at our organizational meeting and looking at it at that time. Yeah, lots of considerations. Any other questions or discussion? And appreciate all the perspectives being shared.
I agree with you. I think it would be nice to have a presentation from them, just indicating how others are supporting them and at the organizational meeting, making a decision. I would support that.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. We'll move to agenda item 4.11. Would you mind if we just go say till like 10:20 and then we could take a break prior to our public input session?
Okay.
Are you okay with that? Okay, we'll start 4.11.
Good morning, Council. Brian from administration. On page 307 of your agenda package is my monthly report. The monthly report is divided into 3 sections as usual. So just my general boilerplate points of the CAO, people services and economic development. One new item that we added into this report, just for council's just information, I thought it might be just interesting for council just to see this. It comes up in general conversation how many staff members does the county have at any given time. So this would be us at absolutely full capacity. So all seasonal positions have been hired. So all the information is here. Just for council's consideration, our intention is to bring this back once annually. We can do it more frequently if required. It's not super hard information to pull. So years of service, just turnover over the last year, and just the gender breakup between male and female staff. As always, the resolution tracker is included in the monthly report. So this starts on page 311. If there are any questions about any of this report, please let me know. Thank you.
Any questions for CAO Henderson?
Sorry, I do have a quick question about the signage. It sounds like we've chosen a successful vendor. Will the signs look the same as the ones that are existing?
Yes,
Is it the
they
same
will.
vendor or is it a different one?
I believe it's the same vendor.
Oh, okay.
I'm almost certain it is. So
I really like the ones that we have, so I just,
yeah, and just for
Wouldn't be weird to
consistency,
be
yeah, sorry, I shouldn't interrupt you, but just through for consistency throughout the county, it would be the same design. I believe there's some other smaller phases, like I think the sign out front might be getting replaced soon with a smaller version, and then Hamlet signs, whenever that phase comes in, it'll be significantly smaller as well.
Any other questions for CAO Henderson?
Just a comment. I like the idea of you starting to take pictures and videos of current our county currently. It's a good idea.
Council's wishes.
I'll move CAO's report.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. All in favor? Motion is carried. I did just mean to recognize as well, I think it's excellent that the WCB claim costs were almost 45% lower than industry standard, resulting in that rebate, which I think that's a good indicator of our commitment to safety and the team at Wheatland County's focus on that. So thank you, and please thank your staff and our safety administration as well. Thank you. Motion for the resolution tracker.
I'll move that council accept the July 4th, 2023 council resolution tracker as information.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 4.12.
Yes, good morning, Council. Brian again from administration. Administration has brought this forward at this council meeting just for council's consideration, and this is to authorize council to declare a municipal agricultural disaster subject to the agreement with the ASB or the Agricultural Services Board. So just for a little bit of context, just to remind council and any public that are listening. So in 2021, council declared a agricultural state of or an agricultural disaster. So what that process was is that it is a discussion for ASB. So what happened was council considered it at, I believe it was this meeting, the one just before council recess, and then the ASB board discussed it. And then the ASB board, which consists of most of or all of council plus 2 members at large, they decided it was also kind of a good idea as well. So then kind of the process was is that it needed council authorization to do. So then council had to hold a special meeting to actually declare that disaster. So we thought preemptively, there is a fulsome report coming to council or to the ASB board tomorrow on the meeting of the 5th. So we thought it would just be proactive to pass this resolution now. And if the ASB board does decide to do one, then that's up to the ASB board to decide. Then council wouldn't have to hold a special council meeting. My understanding of that there has been some discussion in the community about potentially declaring one. So there's been some, and all that information will come tomorrow before the ASB board. So if there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.
I'll move that council declare a municipal agriculture disaster subject to agreement with the Agriculture Service Board.
So just for clarity then, this declaration would only proceed if the ASB agrees after tomorrow's discussions. Okay.
So then if, I was just looking at the package for tomorrow and the recommendation here is opposing this from staff. So I'm just wondering if this motion, then we'd have to come back in August and rescind it if we did not proceed.
I don't think we would need to rescind it because it's a conditional motion. So I also was like really heavily contemplating this because the package tomorrow makes really good points.
Mhm.
I have had a number of agricultural producers reach out and ask if we are having this discussion. And I said that we would be having the discussion. What I like about the motion recommended that Councillor Priest just made is that even if ASB, say tomorrow, did not declare, ASB could, you know, at a future date, if they needed to hold an ASB special meeting, if conditions worsen and not predetermining tomorrow's, it may be declared tomorrow, or there may be a decision to monitor. The RMA guide had some good information on sort of best process for declaring. But this could still be, and administration, please clarify if I'm misinterpreting, but it could still be in place if ASB determines, say, in a month or in a few weeks or that type of thing.
Yes, that's correct. Until or unless council rescinds this potential motion before council.
I'm also just mindful of the month-long break where we don't have a council meeting, and that depending on councillors' plans, it could be challenging to get quorum or that type of thing. So any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Perhaps we will, do you guys want to do another agenda item, or do you want to break prior to the public input session at 10:30?
Let's break.
Okay, let's break until 10:30 and we'll reconvene. Thank you. To order. We're going to move to agenda item 2.31. I've also just had a comment that some of us are difficult to hear. So if everybody can just be mindful to make sure you're using your microphone and maybe bring your microphone closer when you're speaking. Members in the gallery did have a hard time hearing some members of council. And I will turn it over to staff to introduce 2.31.
Good morning, members of council, Madam Chair, Chris from administration. I'm here today to bring back bylaw 2023-15 special events bylaw. So at the June 6, 2023 meeting, council passed resolutions to bring back first reading and then to advertise a public input session for 10:30 for today. That was advertised on social media and our website, and we did advertise in the local paper as well. As of this morning, I've not received any written submissions. However, I'm here for anybody who wishes to speak on that behalf for the public engagement session.
Perfect. Any questions regarding the presentation or the RFD to administration prior to opening the public input session? Or we could do the public input session and then address questions after, depending on, yeah, why don't we do that? And then if there's questions arising out of the input session, we can do that. So just in terms of process, our procedure bylaw does speak to public input sessions, and council has scheduled a formal public input session today. Under timelines, each person presenting to council will be asked to come to the microphone. If you can state your name and introduce yourself, and then each person will have 10 minutes to speak. There is a provision to extend that by council resolution or consensus of council if the 10 minutes is not adequate to convey your position. Persons who have registered with the CAO will be welcomed to speak first, and then those who are not registered will be welcome to speak following anyone who is registered. CAO Henderson, has anybody registered to speak this morning?
No, there has not.
Okay, so then we'll just move through members of the public. If we can just have one member of the public speak at a time. Yeah, and then council debate will continue following the public input session. So I'd like to open the floor to any members of the public who would like to share perspectives on bylaw 2023-15 special events bylaw. Yeah, and we'll move to the phone after. And just for anybody who is joining us via teleconference, after the folks in the council chambers have had an opportunity to address council, we will open the phone lines as well for presentations via teleconference. Would any members of the public like to present? Good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Council, Reeve and administration. My name is Terry Kinsman. I'm the former owner of Rocking Our Guest Ranch, so some of you may have met me through that, but I'm currently helping Carrie and Aaron Young with their application for redesignation for a wedding venue, which is in Wheatland County and not very far from the Rocking Our Guest Ranch. And I'm just wondering why things like weddings, family reunions, I'm not sure what else was on that list, but why are these things exempt from this special events bylaw? Because they are special events.
So during the public input session, we won't be like engaging in response to questions, but we can deliberate that question following the public input session. So it's a good question. Administration did speak to it a little bit when they presented the bylaw. But for now, we'll just hear your perspectives and then council can deliberate on those once everybody's had an opportunity to provide their input.
I mean, my perspective on this is that Carrie's been dealing with this redesignation for probably 18 months. I can't tell you how much money they've put out and how many weddings they've had to defer or not able to book because of this. I think that it doesn't bode well for economic development in the region. And I really don't understand why there's so many roadblocks. So when you implement something like this, I think it's just going to create another roadblock for special events. And I certainly think with the amount of time it takes to get in front of council and present your case, or whatever you want to call it, I can't see that implementing another 90-day restriction is going to speed up that process. And in fact, there's going to be that many more people in the queue. And I don't really understand how council is going to manage this huge influx of now every time someone wants to have a family wedding, or like we had my father's celebration of life in our wedding tent, and it was really a beautiful event. You know, even something as simple as that, or a family reunion, like you are going to clog up council with all of these additional requests for people who own their own land and want to have a function on their land can no longer do so. So that's just my thoughts on the subject based on my background. Thank you.
Thank you. And so just for public clarity, on page 290 of the package, and we won't debate it, I'll just point it out. I'm not sure if administration can move to page 290 at the bottom, where special event is defined. There is an exception that says, but does not include family reunions, weddings, or funerals, events for which a development permit has been issued under the municipality's land use bylaw to allow for incidental gatherings or events or farmers markets. And the only caveat on that is it does go on to say, like that was explained. It also ties into, sorry, I'm just finding where it is, where it would be like a repetitive, or where it would be a development that is specifically an event center. Those exemptions would not apply just because that's more of a business process, whereas the clause on page 290 is more speaking to just like what you were referencing, like a family event, like a one-off wedding, or like you said, a celebration of life, family reunions, that type of thing. I think what also delineates those events is they would not be open to the public. They would be by invitation on private land. Are there other members of the public who would like to speak? Yes.
Good morning, Council. It's good to be back in the chambers. Not a good reason, but good to be back. So I think I understand the intent of this bylaw, but sadly, what happened is kind of like buckshot. You might hit the target, but you're going to hit a lot more people too. And have a few notes here just on the bylaw itself, and if we could just go through that, starting at definitions, the special event itself. And it means any public or private event, gathering, celebration, festival, competition, contest, exposition, or similar type of activity held indoors, outdoors, or the combination of both, which has expected attendance of 200 or more people. So I understand the issue the county and the bylaw were facing was over 200, under 250, which was the old bylaw. But as it says, 200 including staff, personnel, promoters, and which would be volunteers in most cases, in all of our events throughout the county, meaning Duck Lake Days, the Bronc Match, Carsland Bolorama, IL to Ball Tournament, all of those have over 200 people, including staff. And while I understand, if we look at exemptions, anybody with a development permit with the ability to hold special events are exempt. But many of these places don't have development permits. Community halls do not have development permits. So I understand you may think that this isn't another loop to jump through or another red tape for community associations, volunteers to go through, but it is. And you're taking it out of the hands of volunteers and yourselves and putting it into staff to make those decisions whether or not these events go forward. The ag societies here, the business owners here, the private landowners that put on events do their due diligence. Duck Lake Hall has a ball tournament. They have a liquor license. They come here and get the fire permits to make sure that they are within the capacity at the hall. They do their due diligence. And all you're doing now by implementing this bylaw is creating more problems and more responsibilities on those associations, which are already, as we know, small town Alberta communities are finding it harder and harder to find volunteers. People are leaving the communities, moving elsewhere. The sense of community is leaving rural Alberta, and it's decisions like this that increase that happening. So again, I just really hope that you guys reconsider this. I think the idea that a licensing officer may refuse to issue a special events permit license is absurd, to be quite honest, especially if we've already followed the liquor license, the fire permits, the occupancy loads of all of these. It's an asinine decision, to be quite frank. And I don't think you understand that you're putting more onto the staff now. Cluny Wild Game Supper has to go get a DP development permit to just host their fundraiser that has been there for, well, how long has Cluny been there? 55 years. We've had our own personal private land. We've had the Gleason Rodeo, the Wilson Bolorama for 85. I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it is a big issue here. And I think we're seeing, and now I give you guys credit. You guys have been one of the top counties in the province on reducing red tape, getting investment from outside of Alberta, outside of Canada, and promoting our county. But then you bring this in, which does quite the opposite. I mean, we have rodeos that bring in thousands of donations, thousands of dollars in revenue from ticket sales, and we are showing off the biggest businesses in our county with those rodeos due to sponsorship. And you're going to put more roadblocks in the way of us putting on events on private land to deal with an issue, a single issue in Donna's area, Councillor Bigger's area. Like, I would ask you guys to rethink this and make sure that you solve the problem that you're having. but don't have adverse effects on people who are doing good and bringing money in, creating that culture of community in the county. Thank you for your time. I don't know who else would like to speak, but.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. Other members of the public who would like to speak? Perfect. Welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. I am Carrie Young with the Gathering Ranch. I'm in the process for the last 18 months applying for redesignation and rezoning for my agricultural land to rural business. But all I really want to say simply here today is because of all the processes, people trying to reach out to us to have a wedding and we're saying, sorry, we can't. We think we will by this day, maybe all those things. I'm also American. I'm learning what municipality means in Canada. I'm learning all these new rules. It's very different for me. Thank you, Tom, for coming out and meeting with us as our council member and kind of taking some time to learn who we are and what we are about. It's been very emotional for me, so forgive me. Terry, thank you so much for helping me. I just went through the process of looking at 6 bride couples that were trying to come out to our property. And I have been telling them very honestly, we are not permitted, but because they love what we have to do and what we have to offer in our community, they're begging us to help to get this going so that they could get married. I've got people that have pushed their weddings from this season that we had to cancel to 2024 in hopes that we can house their weddings. People love the idea that I'm American. I've come in and I love the idea of Wheatland County and the legacy that this county has. And I wanted to be a part of that. I've left my family. I'm an immigrant, married to a Canadian. I want to be a part of this legacy and building in this community. And it's a tight-knit group. There's lots of people that have been here forever, and there's lots of new people coming in. And I feel like I've personally been kind of put under this umbrella of somebody who didn't follow the rules because I didn't know what they were. I didn't feel like the communication was really that fabulous. I was told about a month ago that there was going to be a meeting about this bylaw and that there was going to be a hope that I could get a summer permit. So back in March, I shared with my brides and grooms the possibility of that, right? So imagine when this came up and I got the email, sorry, this did not include you. I had this sick moment of having to call these brides and grooms, even though we had an open communication, but I had to share with them, I can't house your weddings. I have to call the travel lodge and tell them I have to cancel all this revenue that you're going to get from these weddings. Thank God, because my ability to play in the community and make friends, I've started a mastermind group that is all about getting venues together so we can communicate together. So I was able to work with other venue owners all across the outskirts of this area on through Red Deer, and I don't know my Calgary outskirts very well yet, but they were able to help me move these weddings. But I also had to move the weddings in order to keep them in this county because I wanted to keep the money here for the travel lodge. I'm using them as my example, but to be able to keep that money there that they were counting on. And the people have their flights and the people have their things. I can't be responsible for these couples and them having the faith in me, but I kept saying, Wheatland County is going to come through. I know this is going to happen. I'm learning. I'm meeting with Taylor Felt. My husband and I have been here several times. We reached out to previous owner of Rock and R. She has been teaching me the rules, how to follow them, how to stay in line and not let those excited couples and people that want to work with us push us any further. But we had an event several months ago, or well, I guess 2 years ago, and I want to share with you guys how this went because I keep hearing from people in the community. It was a freedom, whatever, I don't even really know what they were, but they reached out to us and lost their event during COVID because they were in Calgary. And they reached out to us through very good friends of ours that own the business there and said, could you house this? When somebody calls me, when somebody calls you to have an event, we do not ask if you are this sex or what color you are, what your religion is, and all of those things. So imagine I said, an event tomorrow? I can do it, right? I was so excited to have this event. And then I started getting calls from people who said they were Strathmore, Wheatland County members, telling us, if you have this event, you will never have a wedding. You will never have a venue. We had no idea what was going on. These people actually came out and shut my lights off, threatened us for having this. They represented that they were you. So until now, as you know, I've kept tight-lipped. I've never said any of these things to anybody, but I keep hearing about it from people in the community, business owners. And now my husband and I are like, are we being targeted? So it's awesome for me to see how you guys have worked, how you communicated, how you've listened, and it makes me feel better. But I wanted to put a name to a face so you guys could see who I am from the Gathering Ranch. I know the truth of the story and the matter is that we are rule followers. We just didn't know what the rules are. And being told that we could have this possible summer permit and then that being gone like that, and the words like protective services, and no offense, but having a peace officer there when you come for your meeting, you feel like a criminal and you don't know why. So I just want to share with you guys, my big thing, because I've been dealing with all of this, is that if we have a 90-day limit to have these, for these people to get a 90-day, I'm trying to say, to get their permit so that they could have their home party or whatever that event is, they need 90 days. Is that correct? It's 90 days to get your.
It is requested to apply.
Okay, so that 90 days.
Outside of 90 days, there is a provision for an exemption within that time frame.
Okay, that is good to know because I wasn't sure about that. And that's what I really wanted to say is for people in my position, and I had to say I have to turn you guys away or I can't have your party, they can't find something in 90 days because our area doesn't have enough places to hold that. And people are so afraid right now because of what's going on. And I guess the lack of communication for people, which is also, I got to say, shame on our community that there aren't more people here to support this, because there should be more people than us in Wheatland County, in my opinion. But that's a whole nother thing. So anyways, that would be my only thing, is that 90 days might be a bit long. I mean, a little long for people that might need something sooner than that. I don't want people to feel criminalized and like they're breaking rules and doing things that they shouldn't do. So that's all I'm trying to say. And thanks for letting me be a little emotional, because it is for those of us that want to work in hospitality and work in our community. And I want to be able to say, yes, buy a ranch in Wheatland County. It is a place to grow your business. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing your perspectives. Anyone else who would like to share? Good morning.
Morning. If you look at the past, oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm Jason's dad. So half of you hate me already. No, I'm just kidding.
If you can just introduce yourself.
Justin Wilson.
Thank you.
Sorry. There was talk about maybe putting an amendment in there to include rodeo and agricultural events as exempt. That's a start. But first of all, if you look at how rules or laws or bylaws or whatever have affected the general public, for something like this, if you've got one problem and you're trying to fix that problem, but you're creating a problem for 4 other people, at least. Every time you make a law in any level of government, the adverse effect on the public is always more than. You're not going to stop people from breaking the rules by making more of them. That's just a fact. Making another rule doesn't make the people that are breaking the rules to start with follow them. Just because it's a new rule doesn't mean they're going to follow it. And you're just actually doing more harm than good by passing this. And I'm just going to ask everybody right here and right now to not vote for this, because it's a terrible idea. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else who would like to present?
Good morning. My name is Janet Ewell, and my husband and I have been longtime members of the Gleason District Ag Society. And in fact, he's been the president for I don't know how many years now. So that makes me his flunky. And so being a host and a private community member, from both the public and putting on all of these events and looking at gatherings of community and festivals and events that have gone on in our community, it is hard to keep that momentum, that community spirit alive, especially when you're coming off of COVID. We're now a year out of COVID. We are starting to thrive again. We are starting to build relationships with investors, with sponsors, with community members, with hopefully bylaw officers. We are doing our best to rebuild what was already established. So any kind of hindrance, imposition, thought that we possibly aren't following the rules that we had thought that we always did, is just another opportunity for us to think, do we really want to go through the bother? Do we really want to make the effort to bring something into this community? Because it would be really easy for all of us to say, you know what, our life is a lot simpler if we just don't put anything on in this community. If we just let the bloody thing die, because it's another red tape, another thing being pushed down our throat. And I don't care if you're from East Wheatland, West Wheatland, North, it doesn't matter. Because even though our representation is quite small, the voice is very large. And it comes from probably, people didn't even know this meeting was on. They didn't understand the implications of something so small. And I know that it is an old bylaw that we're looking to update, but events are taking more and more people to put on now. So where it was only 250 people, if this now includes 200 people, we are in the business of trying to get more people to expose what this community has to offer. We want more people to come to our events. So if we have 50 people even putting on the event, and we still haven't even got that many people to it, I think you understand what the logistics are. It doesn't take long before you have 250 people now who are attending. And so there's a few gray areas that I think do need to be amended. And I would hope, as Slim, I think for us in our jurisdiction and in our community, we would appreciate the consideration of just not going forward with this kind of a bylaw as well. I know from my family standpoint, that's definitely our thought process, but we appreciate your time and dedication towards giving it to our county to bring forward. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else who would like to share with council?
Sorry, I forgot one thing just to clarify for you guys. So as I said there, Jason Wilson, hi everyone. As I said, you're gonna need to, people who don't have a DP for special events are gonna have to get a DP. But all of the land uses other than rural business don't have special events on permitted or discretionary. So that means you guys are gonna have to go through and change every one of those land uses to make sure that agriculture, community services, parks and rec have special events as either discretionary or permitted in order to give them a development permit. So how long is that going to take? How much staff time is that going to take? A lot. And that's, I think it's, like I said, I understand we need to figure out how to stop the issues of, and have bylaw, have the ability to go in and stop whatever raves or whatever issues are coming on the west side of the county. But this is going to be a lot of work for you guys, and I hope you know that. And like just an idea what other events they're going to affect. De Havilland is, I'm assuming, going to have an opening. And I know it's up to bylaw whether or not that event will be need a DP or a special events permit. But if you're telling De Havilland that, oh, you don't need one because it's okay, we understand, and you go and make everybody else do it, it doesn't look very good. CGC just had their opening with well over 200 people, your guys' selves included. Those kind of events, you're going to have to put special events on, permit to. And I don't think it looks that good for those guys who just have spent millions and thousands of dollars to get into the county and to set up shop. You're going to make them go through that to have a little welcome into the county party. I don't think that's the best idea. So I just would like you guys to know how much work this is going to be for staff and how much time it will take to change all those land uses in order to get a DP on each one of them. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
Justin Wilson again. I did forget, along with the past results of any sort of regulations. You say, I've been told that it's just going to be a single form that you fill out and you get an email that says you've got the permit or whatever it is. And I know I've been promised that it'll never get out of hand and never get more than that. But if you look at the past performance of any government level with permits and regulations, it'll be 2 years and staff will be asking you to charge $50 or $100 or $250 for this application because of the time it takes. And in 5 years, if there's enough events, you'll be hiring another person for this job. And the budget will get out of control over a stupid little thing. And with our events, we put on 2 events and 100% of the proceeds goes to charity. One of them local, one of them province-wide. And we bring in $80,000 of sponsorship for these 2 events. And $50,000 of that is outside of the county. And if you're making these events harder to do, so especially a community event is good at any level. My theory is that you got to try and bring people and money from outside your community to your community. And I can get my sponsor list, not today, but I'll find out the exact numbers. But like I said, we bring in $80,000 of sponsorship for the 2 events, and 50 of it at least is from outside the county. And that's, you're just making things harder for us to put these events on. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Good morning.
Morning. I'm Stephanie Ewell. I'm also with the Gleason Egg Society. And I would ask that you consider to exempt not-for-profits as well as egg societies, Lions clubs, Lionettes, things like that are actually community betterment. I understand that this bylaw is because of an incident that happened in the county, but I don't think that it actually, all of us should not be painted with the same brush. Because obviously the ones that are following the rules essentially are here. The ones that aren't going to follow the rules aren't going to come and get the bylaw permit anyhow. So if you could consider exempting some of the groups, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I feel obligated to talk because everybody else has. So, I'm Diane Brown. I own a business in the county of Wheatland and have been a volunteer for many years. And I'm really requesting you guys, pleading with you to please turn down this bylaw because it will affect the small people. And as far as not having a wide representation here, we're at the east end of the county. Lots of times we don't get any paper. The Strathmore Times might get out to us once in a while. And by the time it comes out, it's pretty outdated. And a lot of us old timers don't always think to check. We got to check the county every month or every day to see what's happening. So I think that's why, because I mean, Hazard is a great community for volunteers, and Duck Lake, Standard, Carsland, Makepeace, they all, Clooney, Gleason, we all have little events that this will affect us. Had they known about this bylaw, I'll bet they'd have been here, but my guess is they did not know about it. So no, not your fault or our fault, but it's just, you know, it's the sign of the times. So anyway, on behalf of the volunteer people in our communities, I request that you please turn this bylaw down. Thank you.
Are there other members of the public who are present in council chambers who would like to speak? If not, I will turn it to people who may be joining us via teleconference that would like to present. Is there anybody, and if anybody is speaking, you may be muted. If there's anybody who's joining us online or via teleconference that would like to speak. I'll just give one more opportunity just in case there's any technical challenges. If there's anybody who would like to speak, I'm assuming if anyone is online, they're unmuted and it's possible for them to speak. We'd welcome you to provide your presentation now. Hearing none, I will close the public input session for this bylaw and open it up to council's wishes. And best practice is to at least get a motion on the floor for council to debate, unless there are questions about the bylaw being presented. But if not, and we'll recall that you can even put a motion on the floor to for second reading, even if you don't support second reading, just to open up that debate, to give us something to debate. Council's wishes.
Okay, I'll move second reading of bylaw 2023-15.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger.
With that?
Yes, so that opens the floor for debate on the bylaw. Please go ahead.
This was brought forward mostly by me. It was never my intent to make this hard for communities. In fact, I thought community events were actually exempt totally. This was to follow a land use bylaws, that if it was on private land, we would have something that we could go in and stop it from happening before, have something more on paper than the dance bylaw, so that we'd have more to stop an event happening that was not suitable for that area. But for community events on community land, on balls, diamonds, on rodeo grounds, it was never ever intended that they would have to ever get a special events bylaw. But rereading the bylaw, it does not cover that in the bylaw. So it does not exempt community lands. So this was just for private landowners that we're going to do a one-off event, which we didn't have anything to go in and stop it. So
if I can just ask administration to clarify. So within our land use bylaw, on page 134 of the PDF, we have community service district in the land use bylaw. Under community service district, so CS, under discretionary uses, we have community building and facility. If we go to the definition of community building and facility on page 18 of the PDF, it says community building and facility means development for social gatherings, club meetings, or multi-purpose uses primarily intended for local community purposes. Typical facilities would include, but are not limited to, community halls and community centers. Now, if something already had approval as a community building and facility, so that use within that community service district, because part of the definition defines those social gatherings, my assumption, and I don't want to assume, I want us to be crystal clear, is that that would be a provision where a license would not be triggered or required, because it's because it's a permitted use within both the definition of the land use zoning, but also the uses. Can administration speak to that?
Through the read to council, that's correct. If it has a standing development permit or approval under that land use, it doesn't require, it was not intended. And when we review it, it would not have required it to come through for a special event, because those uses have those events all the time. And the special events, particularly that special, it's something that's a one-off. It doesn't happen on a regular basis, these events. That's why weddings were excluded when it becomes a wedding venue where they're holding multiple events per month and not a one-off for a family event.
Because that would be clearly addressed in other land use bylaw provisions.
That's correct.
For development. So just a question though, do all of our community halls or community centers have development permits? And does the bylaw wording like capture that? If they do not have an actual development, some may have been grandfathered.
Through the Reeve to council, they do have a development permit. They required it when they construct the facility. And then there are ones that also have gone further and had acquired permits if they're putting on additional fields, not the ball fields, but like if they had a rink, for example, outdoor that was addition to the hall, they'll get a development permit for those additional things, but it's all covered. And then under the definitions, under the community hall, it's those events that they hold things at those facilities. So if a community hall held a wedding, they would not require a special events permit.
So what about ball diamonds?
Ball diamonds are part of the playground recreation, and they would have had a permit for that.
So this doesn't really explain it though, in this bylaw. It doesn't really bring that out. I've read
So
it.
would it be possible for administration to bring back something? I would like confirmation that all of our community buildings, like I'm thinking the halls in each of our hamlets or our named areas, that they have either existing development permits. Like we don't want, the last thing that I have heard from this council, we don't want to create red tape and we don't want to create bureaucratic processes that are cumbersome.
Or extra costs.
For sure, absolutely. We typically have been, and Mr. Wilson is right, we typically have operated on a cost recovery basis for staff time. Council is responsible for mitigating bloating of work or costs, and we take that on every day. We focus on that, and that was not the intention of this. I very much want to say how much our council appreciates every volunteer and every individual in Wheatland County that contributes to the fabric of who we are. Without question, agricultural and rodeo events are inherent to who Wheatland County is, what we're founded on, and what we fundamentally are, and what we want to preserve, and we want to encourage that. We don't want to create red tape. To Councillor Bigger's point, I think it's important that it is explicit in the bylaws so that there's clear public understanding.
Yes. Another thing too is I think we need to keep agriculture and rodeo out of this bylaw. That is one of our biggest events through every community. And I think we need to take that out. Plus parades. I don't know why parades would be in there. Parades is done on a public road. They're done everywhere. There should never be have to get a development permit for a parade. So if we added in that it's very explicit that it's not on community land or Parks and Rec land. This does not, it's only on private use land, and that we exclude agriculture and rodeos and parades.
And I'm just going to play devil's advocate. Like, I do agree with that to a certain extent. And I do just want to point out two things in the bylaw that maybe we could like flesh out a little bit more. And I'm just going to go to it, sorry. So first I'll just start with the statement. Like when you go to the MGA, to section 3, municipal purposes, one of our purposes, like one is to provide services, facilities, or other things that in the opinion of council are necessary or desirable for all or part of a municipality. And we need to balance that with C, which is to develop and maintain safe and viable communities. One thing that we all, I think, are aware of is that society is increasingly litigious. We do have to be aware of liabilities, and I'm not totally clear on like if the bylaw can assist from a liability perspective. But we do, as municipal elected officials, have a responsibility to contribute to the safety of our communities. We can do that by being proactive. I think I could envision, and I think it's important to preface this with too, our bylaws are not written for the 99.9% of people that do things with integrity and responsibility and with a commitment to serving their community and are already executing incredibly well-planned events. But we do know, and we've given an example of one event, but there have been others that our current bylaws do not address. And I anticipate there could be more in the future. And we're hearing from many people within our agricultural community that have concerns about the bylaw, but I've also heard from many people within our agricultural community that have concerns about their way of life and the quality of life and the safety of their animals, and the nuisances and risks that events that are not well planned can create for Wheatland County residents and agricultural producers and, you know, their livestock and those types of things. Part of that proactive attention to safety is making sure that our first responders are aware of events. And so we do have, there is a provision under, sorry, I should have gone to it sooner. There is a provision where events are recurring. And I think that's critical for a number of things that we're talking about today. So under 5.5, under 5.5, there is a provision where the licensing officer may, in their discretion, exempt a specific function or event from a requirement to obtain a permit where in the interest of the officer to do so would be in the public interest. So we have that already in there. And then we also have under 5.7, if a special event to which a license has been issued is recurring, the licensing officer may at their discretion renew the license for that special event on any terms or conditions the licensing offer deems appropriate. So I'm just wondering about the possibility for where we have recurring events, some of which have already been referenced today that are well planned, that are already doing other licensing requirements. It might be a license through AGLC for liquor sales, or through public health for a special event, which is already required and somewhat cumbersome already. If there would be an ability to provide basically like approval on an ongoing basis for those recurring events, and there could be an appeal process so that if the licensing officer refuses to do that, it could be brought to council to be approved, because I recognize we don't want, you know, bureaucratic overreach, and at the end of the day, we're accountable to you. So integrate some kind of an appeal to that, but where there would be a process where, for example, a recurring event that is well planned, that our administration is already signing off on, say, for an AGLC approval, where there could be sort of approval in perpetuity with some caveat where it could be revoked if there was like some substantive safety issue identified through a complaint process. That way you're not, and also a provision where like changes to the scope of the event would need to be brought to the attention of our administration. I'm wondering if we could create some kind of balance. And the reason I'm focusing on recurring events rather than rodeo, I could foresee a situation where that 0.1% of the population who is not trying to do something well could come in and call an event a rodeo, and it could be a screaming rage fest or whatever, something that has significant fire risk that could, you know, compromise feedstock for, you know, for livestock or like something like that. You can never anticipate the worst thing that people would do. And it's often folks who are not, you know, Wheatland County residents or ratepayers coming in and, you know, doing an agreement on leasing a piece of land or that type of thing. That way we're not penalizing our current community groups. They could go through the approval process perhaps once just to demonstrate that, you know, all of the plans are in place, that, you know, the things are there. Our administration, for many of the events that have been discussed, have already reviewed these to sign off on, say, an AGLC permit, for example, and they're aware. But I do think it's important that our first responders are aware of events that they're happening, even just to, and I have no idea what we do at the county, but perhaps have, peace officers aware, EMS and fire aware that there's going to be an event with increased population in Wheatland County where we may want to have capacity or resources at least on standby or aware that it's happening, that type of thing.
So is there anything in our first bylaw? What was in our first bylaw that never let us go into and stop that event? What was missing out of there?
Through the chair, the number of people. The old bylaw was specific to 250 people or more. So that's where it stopped us from going in to do.
So that's why that's why I went to the land use. I don't want to make it just, even with saying that it's a reoccurring one, that they do have to do anything, still makes this one cumbersome. Does AGA, can you answer me this, AGLC, do you have to get a letter from the county?
The fire service, so you have to have signatures from fire service, from public health, and from RCMP. I just happen to have just done one.
So if they have to get an AGLC license, they've done everything they have to anyway. So why would you worry about?
And that's where I could see it would be like an approval in perpetuity. Like it would basically say you have an annual event that typically occurs in Carsland, for example, and it's an annual event. They could walk through this process one time, like using already the existing things that they've done for other approvals.
On private land?
On any land,
if it's on community land, then they shouldn't have to do anything.
Okay, but like, don't think about that one specific. So just say on a random, we won't say a place. Like if it's already captured within their current approvals, like exempt that, this would not apply, and administration can clarify that for us. But say an unrelated event, say it's a parade. I don't think we have any parades in Wheatland. Yeah, we do.
Carsland?
Yeah.
Gleason, yeah.
So maybe they get, and parades are a tricky one, but parades do also, like, I guess because it's on our roads, I think it is important that our bylaw at least be aware that there's going to be an event on our roads. Let's not address parades. That's a tricky one. Some other random event that happens every year that's not already on a permitted, like in a permitted use, according to the land use zoning, I'm envisioning walking through the process, getting an approval that would be approved in perpetuity with the caveat that if the scope of the event changes, then they would notify the county, and like that would be addressed somehow. Administration would have to come up with some wording and bring it back. So as long as it's the same event happening every year, they're not having to come back every year because they have approval in perpetuity, provided there's not a substantive change. Like I'm trying to minimize the amount, especially of onerous work on volunteers and that type of thing, and balancing that with our responsibilities to ensure that events within our municipality are safe. Councillor Laprise.
So I just have a question. If we were not to approve this, would our nuisance and our noise bylaws give us any power to protect neighbors from big parties or whatever is happening? Could we go in and with a nuisance complaint and say, it's you're causing unreasonable interference with the enjoyment or the quality of life of your neighbors?
Through the chair, it could be a stretch. However, there's a process that has to go through for the nuisance bylaw to enforce it, i.e. like the going through like the remedial order process and so on and so forth, which is actually stated in that bylaw. In order, if there's a contravention of that bylaw, we have to go through the process with either warning letters, remedial orders, and so on and so forth. So enforcement would be very difficult to do in an immediate fashion, but it could be done. Absolutely.
And wouldn't the RCMP have a role to play if a party was out of control? And I mean, they could shut it down immediately, could they not?
Through the chair again, yeah, there's unlawful assembly, there's breach of the peace, there's all sorts of things like that, but it's a very broad definition of what constitutes an unlawful assembly versus a breach of the peace versus an event getting out of control or an event being held without anybody's knowledge that gets out of control. It can cause other problems.
They wouldn't go to this event that we had.
And I'm curious why they wouldn't.
They said it was a bylaw issue.
Oh, really?
So I have like really thought about this because, and this was raised in the public input session. Like, I do agree with the premise of using bylaws that we have in place. The challenge with something like the noise bylaw is it's reactive versus being proactive. And I think we need to delineate in our minds, and I want the least amount of regulation necessary, but we also deal with those folks who are negatively impacted. So you have these like competing principles of landowner rights, which I think there would be consensus that we will defend those. But we also have landowner rights that include the quiet enjoyment of their property. Now, quiet, and there's more to it than that, but like the enjoyment of their property. That can be impacted by things like noise, which we have a noise bylaw that is reactive to it. It could be things like fire risk, though, or it could, and there's other elements to it that may not be addressed in current bylaw, where for all those folks that are doing things in an honorable and with good intention way, are not going to create issues. But where you could foresee folks that are coming in and taking advantage of land, or perhaps an acreage owner or something like that, that don't understand the potential risks of, and the example that Councillor Brigger and I are pointing to are because we were in like fairly extreme drought conditions. We had no idea like what risks there might be in terms of fire, public safety, things like that. There were definitive risks to livestock that were demonstrated to us, and livestock in the immediate sense, but also livestock in terms of longer term and, for feed availability and that type of thing. We can respond to fires, but sometimes it's better if you can like head off at the pass, something like that, or at least ensure that our first responders are aware. Obviously, it's a complex balance. I do have a question to administration, and if it needs to come back, that's fine. Just a question around liability and what our liability would be without a bylaw, and if our liability is mitigated by having a bylaw in place, or whether our liability could increase by having a bylaw in place if we have permitted an event. And then I also have a question around right to access events. The bylaw does reference that I think it was the licensing officer would have the right to, sorry, I'll just go to it. So under 7.1, a designated officer of the municipality or his or her delegate may at all reasonable times enter on any public or private property to inspect and determine whether this bylaw and the terms, conditions, restrictions, and requirements of any license issued under this bylaw are being complied with. So obviously, if this bylaw were approved, then that provision would be there. I'm curious if we could get information on like the legalities or right to access an event. Like say this bylaw was not in place, do our peace officers have legal access to events? On public land seems like a no-brainer, but what about on private land is my question. Yeah, those are my first two. And Deputy Reeve Clausen.
Sorry.
And then Councillor Eichert.
Thank you. Listening to all this and the analogy about the shotgun I'm thinking of more of a targeted approach. If I look at the special events definitions under page 290's K, special events, I think if we did the first two, music festivals, concerts, and our live pre-recorded music, dances, parties, etc., and left out parades, rodeo, circuses, trade show, because we can always change this bylaw in the future, but to start, we could just focus on those two. That's where the problems were set up. I'm really disappointed that the RCMP wouldn't respond, because I think on their cards it still says to serve and protect. And I've been kicked out of many parties in a rural area where they've come in and said, boys, it's time to go home. I've been in gravel pits. I've been all over the place. It hasn't been their land, and they've kicked us out. But that is their job. And if they have a problem next time I'm here, I will tell them that's their job, because they should be doing this. They're to serve and protect. If they're disturbing the peace, they have more power than our bylaws do. No offense.
For clarity, they did respond, but there was no enforcement. So they were.
They can still kick people off the land. I've seen it. I think everybody in this room's been in the same situation I have been, where they don't have authority, but John Neighbor says, we want them off our land and they'll get you off the land. And they have the power to do it. They have non-lethal weapons. They have all kinds of stuff to get people out. Pepper spray is an amazing thing. So for me, if we do a targeted approach, I think, and I should say to start off, this is a process of first, second, third reading. I'm glad that we had first and welcome the public, because we need to get more eyes on this to make sure we're not hurting anybody. We had a problem. We've taken an approach and we've tried to cover some more stuff and what ifs and whatnots. And to me right now, let's just focus in on the problem. If it comes back in the future and there's more problems, we can come back and change this. That's not an issue. We can have the same process with the same people in the room and say, okay, that didn't work or that didn't work. But if we're bringing in so much extra stuff, why are we doing that? And I still say, RCMP has the ultimate power to do this. If someone calls them and says, there's a problem here, I mean, there's Alberta Health Services. If you're on land and you don't have drinking water, you don't have toilets, they can shut you down. The liquor permit, they can shut you down. There's so many different other bodies that have oversight over this stuff. Now, they may not be working on the weekend. That's not my fault. There's oversight there. I mean, that's, this stuff will all happen on the weekend. So those are my thoughts. I won't support the motion going forward as is. I think we should kick it back to staff with some of these recommendations, and then we're in no rush to get this done. Let's do it right.
I don't mind the targeted. I mean, that was the problem. It's not that it does get complicated if we do exclude this, exclude that. If we did do the targeted, that would actually help. Just do the.
And if someone comes in and says it's a rodeo or something like that, then we can have that argument and define it. Rural people have a way of dealing with stuff too that can fix it too.
I did have a question too, though. I was under the assumption that I do remember Rockinar Ranch came in and got a designated.
This is on a different site that was being referenced.
Oh, a different site. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
So I was going to suggest something similar, and that yours might be better than mine. I was going to say that I wouldn't support it unless we maybe exempted events that already have AGLC approval, because they've already gone through the process. We're not asking them to redo it for us. So either one or the other, I think, would be a way to help make this a more useful bylaw.
Councillor Eichert, then Councillor Kester, then Councillor Lawerson.
We're using a sledgehammer to try to kill a gnat. People that we're trying to stop here are the horrible 1% that are going to do this no matter what happens. What I'm terrified of is we put another layer of regulations in there, and that's the layer that, oh yes, there's always that straw that broke the camel's back. You can take it, we can take it. If Wilson Rodeos decide that they don't want to ever do this again, what is that loss? What is that loss to society? I'm not willing to take that chance. I'm not going to vote for this. There's got to be a better way to do this. So I'm thinking, so using me as an example, if my neighbor decides to have a party and all of a sudden I see 400 people next door to my place, I'm going to wander over there and I'm going to ask them, what the hell is going on? And that's, yes, exactly, because being a good neighbor. And I will lay out the perimeter. And he said, well, I'm going to have fireworks. And I said, no, you're not. You're going to scare my cattle. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. I'm going, no, you're not. And if he says, I'm going to do that, then I make a call to the RCMP when this starts happening, and the RCMP, who we pay $850,000 a year for, on top of what the government pays for, are going to come out and they're going to use their power, because as Councillor Clausen says, we have all been in situations where we've had great parties going and they decided that the party was over, and it was over. And so I don't think you can legislate. You just cannot legislate people that are not gonna, your rave that you're trying to stop. Did they have any, they weren't selling booze there. It was a bring your own event. Like they're not gonna, they don't care. They're gonna have that deal. There's gotta be some sort of muscle in the community at the time. And it's gotta be, I've gotta get involved if it's my point. I just can't go, well, I don't want it. I've gotta man up. I've gotta go there and say, no, you're not gonna do this. If you're gonna do this, I'm gonna call in the RCMP. The RCMP are gonna come over and they're gonna stop it or throw somebody's butt in the hostel. And having this rule isn't gonna change that. And that's the problem with it. It is, we're penalizing, like the stuff that we've already exempted now. Like, I'm looking at this event deal, and now we're gonna exempt, but ball diamonds and all that kind of stuff, that's in here. And I hadn't even thought about that. Like, that Ball Diamond Fairfield in Cheadle, I mean, it's over 200 people every weekend. You know, so.
I think just for clarity, that would be excluded because it's part of the use.
But it's mentioned in there. So now I've got to read through this thing to find out whether I'm exempted or not. And it's just, you know, sorry, if you itemize one thing, raves, I might vote for it, but that'll be it.
I'm going to go to CAO Henderson and then Councillor Kester and then Councillor Laursen.
Yes, so through the Reeve, there's been a lot of good input and discussion here today. So administration is kind of thinking that there might not be clarity for specific events that are held in councillors' divisions. So it might be worthwhile to potentially rescind second reading of the bylaw and allow administration to go back and kind of gather a list of events. Ones that we think of, ones that we've heard of in the public input session, and say if they're exempt or not. We do believe a lot of them would be exempt, but if council does also have other concerns that they want to bring forward, obviously lots of concerns have been brought forward now, but it might be worthwhile to further consider it prior to passing any further readings. Alternatively, council could pass this reading and then direct administration to answer the questions of the Reeve that were posed earlier during the debate, or council could obviously just defeat second reading. Ultimately, it's up to council, but administration thinks it would be worthwhile to provide clarity on the events that are in question. We do believe a lot of them would be exempt, and yeah, go from there. Thank you. Oh, and the amendments, of course. Thank you.
Go to Councillor Kester and then Councillor Laursen, then Councillor Bigger.
Couple comments to make. Why stop at just eliminating them all but the front two? Every year Rosebud has Hall of the 50 Minutes of Fame. They're on the street. I asked her right away, is it going to be an extra burden for people that already get permits? If you're going to deduct 5 things, I say they're all gone. They come in and get their special permits and they try and work, and it's been a long process for them. I was on a separate note, same problem maybe. When Stan and Charlotte Regal were in this morning, got their redesignation done, I was happy for them. It was only about 3-4 years. And I hear the same problem here again with the wedding thing. We're spending all this time on this, but we're not looking after our people. Like Tom says, we got some gnat there and that's what we spend our time on. What about our ratepayers that deserve our attention? I thought, and there's lots of things that take a long time, but this, especially when we already had one approved in the area. I know the problems and the people and everything else, but still, there was one there. Why can't we have another? Or move it? Just comments. I don't like the time. It's either yes, no, give it the appropriate time. Don't let people hang on like that.
Councillor Laursen.
Okay.
And I would agree with that. I think the problem here, and I've heard it today, and I want to thank everybody that spoke because you have echoed the concerns that I heard both at the open house in Cluny and from the residents in Division 7, which I serve. This is, just by the discussion of trying to interpret it today at this thing, this bylaw is too ambiguous and it's going to be burdensome and there's going to be unintended consequences that people such as the ones in the gallery are going to have to live with all the time. So I think we should rescind this. If there's a need to solve this one single problem in Councillor Bigger's area, then let's solve that problem, but let's not make the rest of the county pay for that.
Councillor Bigger?
Yeah, well, you are serving your ratepayers when the ratepayers are the ones phoning you and complaining also, right? That one-off thing could happen to anybody in anyone's area. But I will rescind my motion. And we'll go back to CAO's recommendations and see if we can either work with what we have in the older bylaw or add something to it that might effectively help us. Anyway, so I rescind the motion to move the second reading of bylaw 2023-15.
So then to move forward, if we wanted administration to either do any amendments or to bring anything further forward, we would need council direction to do that. Hearing lots of diverse perspectives and good discussion, good points being raised. Just one note, just based on like one personal perspective based on some of the discussion. I did like the targeted, the potential to look at a targeted approach as well. And I had also thought about the regulation, like events that already have regulations in place, but I could also foresee where you might get AGLC approval, but it could still create like substantive issues in a rural setting that the AGLC would not be responsible for governing within their applicant. They might meet the requirements for AGLC, but there could still be potential impacts, say to agricultural producers in a rural municipality that AGLC is not responsible for, that we are responsible for, which I think potentially targeting some of those potentially higher impact events for the point around Rosebud. I think that's an important consideration as well. And I think that was raised potentially before, and administration would need to clarify, but whether that would already be permitted based on like their development permit or their zoning for whatever the zoning is in Rosebud. But again, I wouldn't want it to be cumbersome for that as well. Like it's clearly in line with the use of, you know, the theater and the outdoor stage that's already there and that type of thing. So. And I do agree it's better to get this right. This can be iterative. I think we all know that, you know, if issues arise in the implementation of it, we can always amend, but it is better to, and that's the reason we are having today, is to get it a stronger, you know, to make better decisions rather than trying to amend errors or unintended consequences. I agree with that, Councillor Laursen. Better to foresee those and anticipate them and try and address them. So certainly agree with that. Also recognizing that another council could come in with the sledgehammer, and we can never, you know, prevent future decisions or future implementation of bylaws, but council can always, there was a point too around the implementation of it. Council is responsible for monitoring the implementation of bylaws and amending as well if issues do arise. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
In terms of process, the bylaw second reading, I think, can take up to a year, can it not? Timeline?
2 years.
2 years, so we got lots of time to deal with this. So what does staff need based on the discussion here to come back with something?
Administration, we just need a motion directing us to amend the bylaw as requested or as discussed during the council debate, and also provide any other relevant information.
I'd be happy to make that motion to amend the bylaw as discussed during the meeting today come back at a future date? Do you need an actual date? And then I think also a discussion we had this morning too about communication with our residents. This might be a good opportunity to take that out to the public. Good discussion to take out in the area and advertise and see if, because obviously we got some loopholes. I've heard several times today that people aren't getting this information. We don't have as good a papers as we used to, and frankly, I don't think people read them, considering some of the articles I've seen in there and never got a phone call. So maybe we got to figure out a different way for communication too. And I know we've been trying that, but be a good learning experience as well.
We did do very fulsome engagement on communication, and I think we are like looking at different and have implemented different modes of communication. I've been actually getting really good feedback about like communication in general, recognizing that it needs to be multimodal, that not everybody's online. So I believe the newspapers are only distributed when the county connector is in them. And I actually called to see if I could get a subscription, and they were very resistant to a subscription to the newspaper. They said just to pick it up, like at the places that you can, it's free. You can just pick up free copies, but I'm terrible at remembering to do that. So, but they said they really only do subscriptions for people overseas, which I don't, maybe that's a conversation we can have, but maybe it's moot if people aren't reading the paper either. But we can certainly, communication is dynamic. Like we have to be constantly responding to the feedback that we're getting and figuring out ways to get the information that's most pertinent to people. The vast majority of what we do is super boring and people don't want to hear about what we do. And I'm not really joking, like good governance is for the most part boring when you're doing it well. But yeah, lots to consider for sure. Council's wishes if there's an appetite for administration to, oh, you did move, right, sorry. So to amend the bylaw based on.
Of order, didn't Donna make a motion to rescind?
I did.
She did.
I don't think we need to vote on a motion to rescind. She's just removing the motion from the floor. So we don't need to vote on that. And Deputy Reeve Clausen has moved to direct administration to amend the bylaw based on input from the public input session and discussions and council discussion. Is that accurate?
And I think you had some questions. Does your motion take into consideration bringing back that information about liability?
I think administration will bring those back when the bylaw is brought back. And if there's other questions too, like, and obviously anybody ask any questions. There were questions too raised during the public input session that I think are important to be addressed as well. So we can make sure that there's fulsome responses to all the questions that were raised. Councillor Kester?
We also heard today just to scrap it. We've already got a bylaw, and it was before my time here. It was a rave out in Division 7, I believe, from what I heard. Remember, doesn't matter. I'd be a far happier that we don't direct staff to redo the bylaw. We just have them look on how we can remedy the situation. And if that involves redoing the bylaw, or if that involves something else, I'd far sooner have that investigation done than saddle them with redoing a bylaw for the sake of redoing the bylaw. Just look at the situation. How can we handle it? What are the best tools? And then move forward from that report instead of saddling them, oh, we got to redo the bylaw and make it fit. That would be my thing. So I'm just scrap it. If you want to direct staff to look into the situation, it's a problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but is bylaw the best way? Maybe there's another way. Maybe the next time the RCMP in here and they're always asking us what they want them to do. Well, that's a good thing.
So taking into consideration that those comments, I wonder if a potential amendment to your motion directing administration to amend the bylaw, if we could consider or examine the historic bylaw, the extended dance bylaw, whatever it's called, and for administration to bring back a recommendation for the most effective means to address this. And then that would give administration, I guess, more liberty to look at, because a substantive amount of work has been put into the new bylaw. And I think we did get rid of a lot of stuff that was outside of our jurisdiction, that was within our existing bylaw that we already have on the books. And I agree with you. I don't want like staff time wasted if we're going to scrap the whole thing, but we do have an existing bylaw that is not optimal either. So I don't know if it's more effective to amend the new special events bylaw based on the feedback and council's discussion and council's intent, or if it would be more efficient for staff. That way we give the staff the liberty to determine what is most effective. Councillor Laverson and then Deputy Reeve Clausen.
And that's where my head is. If this bylaw is necessary, that's one thing. But if it's not necessary and we can just solve this problem with something else, even by amending the existing bylaw, why create another new one that's going to add another level of problems for everyone?
No, thank you for that. I think I'll keep the motion the way it is right now because we've spent time on this. It is a first, second, third reading, and this is the process. Like, we can change everything. And I think it's also, I think Councillor Kester said this bylaw is fairly old, and I think it's good governance to go through and update these things. And I mean, I've heard of bylaws where there's some ancient things in some cities over 100 years old that should be gone, and they've just left them on the books. So we may end up coming to that point, but I think it's important to update it. It's been on the books, and we found it was ineffective for a certain thing. So if we focus that on that certain goal, I think we can come up with something that's palatable for everybody. To completely scrap it right now doesn't even help with the problem if it comes up tomorrow. So, well, we have a bylaw that was ineffective, so no, I'll just leave it the way it is.
So we have a motion on the floor. Any other questions or discussion? And also, I guess, just to add to the communication process, please be aware, and I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure colleagues around the table would reiterate this as well. I certainly engaged with ratepayers over the last few weeks since this, and actually even prior to that, because this bylaw was brought forward a few years ago, and I have had engagement with ratepayers on both sides of this situation, those who have been impacted by events and those who, do not see the merit in this bylaw. And so that is definitely an iterative process, and we bring all of that engagement that we have with ratepayers, even if it's casual at the grocery store or at a bronc riding or at, a parade or just in the community or walking down the street. We bring all of that. That's part of our responsibility as representative government to bring those perspectives to this table. So we wanted a specific input session so that people had an opportunity to address all of council, but I know we all bring those perspectives with us as well. And they are complex. We represent diverse perspectives in the community as well. And we have that challenging role of balancing those competing principles and perspectives and trying to come up with the right outcomes. So that's just more in terms of communication, because I think everybody knows where to I have ratepayers that find me on my evening walk. They text, they call. And so, we're always open to communication that way as well. And it is a two-way street. I do always say communication is dual responsibility. We have a responsibility to make sure information is available, but folks also have a responsibility to seek information. Not that you want to be checking the county website every week or whatever for what we're doing, because that is not effective. But I do want to thank everybody that attended and everybody that shared perspectives today, as well as those who have engaged with us leading up to this public input session. And thank council for the diverse perspectives and the good debate, because that's how good governance happens for sure. There is a motion on the floor. Any further questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Good afternoon. We'll call the meeting back to order. We will start with agenda item 4.13. Yeah, I think she said she would just be 1 minute.
Good afternoon, Council. Brian from administration. Just here to present the Wheatland Housing Management Body joint announcement letter. So at the June 20th council meeting, there was a request from council to add the draft joint communication from the WHMB onto the agenda today. Between the 20th and today, July 4th, that letter was approved on, it was approved on June 26th. So it was requested by council to add this to the agenda. So we did add it, and we've just asked for council to accept this report as information. So what we did was we did include the joint communication that was, or the communication, sorry, that was sent out from the WHMB. And then I also did include our resolution that was passed by council in April. So one thing I just thought of as I was kind of doing this report was that it might be worthwhile for council to communicate the resolution to the board formally, just so the board has the resolution. One thing that I think there may have been some expectation from council that our county council would formally have a chance to have their input into this communication. The board put out their communication, which is great. But I think maybe there was some expectation from council that they would actually have an input into it formally through a council meeting and public debate. So my recommendation here is to accept this report as information. However, it may be wise for council to send over the resolution to the WHMB board, just so they do have it, and just to see if they're actually amenable to a joint communication plan and the criteria in the resolution. If there are any questions about the report, please let me know. Thank you.
Council's wishes or discussion?
Just as a point of discussion, I think I think the housing board maybe would benefit from understanding how we want to collaborate, maybe come up with some kind of a strategy for how to do this. I think they put this communication together and it was suggested that it come to council for approval. They didn't really feel like that was the right process. So I think maybe they're looking for a process to follow where we could collaborate. Like, I just don't think they know how we can collaborate. So if we had some suggestions of how we could, if everything they put out needs to come from county to a council meeting, then we should communicate that if that's what our intention was, or if we intended it to be something else. I'm just not 100% sure what my suggestions to the board could be.
I think maybe some points to address throughout the communication process would be timeline, maybe like a thing. That's just something that comes to my mind, like what's an actual timeline for funding, and so people know what's coming, and in general. So there's something in print that says that here's where we're at. Like, I always envision the thermometer you see in a church or something. It says we've got X amount of funds. We're doing this milestone. We have, we got to do this. Here's the timeline for this, that kind of thing. Like,
that's fair. Of course, we don't know when the Alberta government is going to have our next opening for grant submissions. We could guess at it, but that also leads people down the wrong path. So it's a tricky thing to do.
Because people are already, I've been asked a few times, well, how come it's not going right now? Well, I can't answer that question, but if there was a document I could refer them to and say, here's the timeline, that would be helpful. That's all I want to see. And I think it shouldn't be just county directed. Should be all partners should have a review of it, because we're all part of it. And they may just rubber stamp it, that's fine, but that's all I was thinking.
So I just attended the WHMB special meeting where they approved this correspondence. Just as an observer, it was a public meeting. And I guess I'll preface this with that I recognize the WHMB is an autonomous organization with a board that governs it. I do have to say that it was extremely disheartening to observe the meeting where this correspondence was approved. There was the point raised around one of the conditions on our approval for the letter of support for this potential project. That was pretty blatantly disregarded, and I found the tone of the meeting less than collaborative and somewhat disrespectful to Wheatland County. Particularly disheartening given the scale of this potential project and just the level of, I guess, collaboration that will be required to move this forward. I do think also part of the rationale for that collaborative communication plan was because of some of the negative communication that occurred in the community sessions prior to our approval of the letter of support. There has been, in my opinion, substantive misinformation about this project and a lack of managing expectations. Council, that's been raised in this council chambers previously on multiple occasions. I too have residents who, over the last several years, continually ask, why are shovels not in the ground? Why is it not finished? Which validates in my mind the challenges around managing expectations. Examples of misinformation would be the deadline for the grant application. So there was a clear public perception that there was a hard deadline at the end of June for the grant would be closing then. When that communication was being conveyed to the public, that grant application period was not open. I did hear, I believe it was a consultant at one of the meetings, indicate that it was, and I'm paraphrasing, should have been anticipated or was expected that grant application would not open due to the election, and just sometimes that sort of period leading up to the election where government programs don't necessarily operate in a traditional manner. I would argue that the WHMB board should have also anticipated that. I think it was well known across Alberta that there was an election anticipated. I realized the writ was not dropped until I think the end of April. But we are on an established election cycle, and that's well understood by folks in Alberta. I think there are some caveats where that could have been potentially delayed, but I think it would have been prudent to anticipate that may have been the case. That deadline was then, I would argue, used to spin public perception of our council and the time that we were taking to do due diligence on contemplating a project of this scale. And I think it's irrefutable that negative impact occurred to individual councillors, to confidence in us as a council as a whole. And so part of the rationale, at least from my perspective, for requesting as part of our approval of a letter of support, some joint communication was to try and mitigate the damage that occurred due to comments that were made during community sessions, discussions that were held, and the impact that had on our council and individual councillors. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request. I've thought a lot about this, and it's really disheartening that is the approach that the board has taken. We do have a motion on the books to convey some of our concerns around WHMB to the province and to the ministry responsible for oversight of the WHMB. And I would like to see us action that. I think this decision that was made to issue this letter on June 26th is just, I think, an example of some of the concerns that we have. So a little bit somewhat related to this, but I would also just like to see council as well submit to administration concerns that should be conveyed to the province. I think now we have cabinet is established. I don't think mandate letters are out, but I would anticipate that they would be out shortly. But we do have an established minister, and so to facilitate that, if council could forward concerns and perhaps administration could compile that for council review and submission to the ministry. That's one way we can approach this. I do like administration's recommendation to also share the motion. I do know that the motion was publicly available and would have certainly been shared by our representatives to the board, so I think that's publicly available. But perhaps just a consideration of some type of letter to the board on behalf of council, perhaps expanding on, as administration said, and as discussion has indicated, some ideas around what collaborative communication could look like. And for me, part of that would be perhaps correcting some of the, whether it was misrepresentation or misinformation that was provided regarding our council. I think it's infinitely more difficult to repair damage that's caused like that, because at the time it's, you know, it incited a lot of anger, and people are very passionate about seniors. They built our county and they built our province, and I know we all care about them a lot. People get really passionate about that, but I think that exacerbated some of the negative impacts to our council, and I would like to see some attempt to correct that, even though the correction will not have the impact that the original damage had. Those are some of my thoughts. I'll open the floor to other perspectives. I do support the idea of a letter. Councillor Bigger.
So I was at that meeting too, and they were trying to put together the joint communications. But I do feel that I don't have anything negative about the content of this letter, but going forward, I think they have to come to council, and that should go to the other villages' councils too, because we are one voice. I couldn't actually speak up and feel like I should say anything on that, because that's my opinion. That's not us as a council. So if it's going to be a joint communication, all councils should get together, and then, so it should be sent out to the councils. They vote on it, and then it goes back in, and then it becomes joint, right? I think that's more process that I think they should follow, rather than at a public meeting, and I'm speaking just on myself. Yeah. Thanks.
That's a great suggestion. I think we should outline that in a letter to the housing board, just specifically saying that.
Just reading the motion here, it says establishment of a communication strategy between WHMB board and Wheatland County that conveys. So like you said, maybe we need to draw something up that says, or have staff draw something up that what we're looking for. That it has to go to each one. You know, the timeline will be submission. You know, it's going to take a little time to go through everybody, so that you can, things like that. And if they agree to it, that's fine. If they don't, that's their choice too.
We could even outline how often we want to communicate. If, you know, like you say, you know, ratepayers are asking us what's going on. Maybe we need to say we need a monthly newsletter. It has to start at the board, come to all councils, then
we can put it on our website. And
yep.
It's all the same communication. It's all the same. Yep. It's all been, everybody knows what's coming.
Good idea.
And if and my thing is, there's a document you can refer back to and say, no, we're at this stage. So everybody knows.
Yep.
That would be good.
I guess you could say waiting on Alberta grant application approval, but expecting fall. Like, it could be vague.
No different than a project timeline we would see on any other project. Staff would come in and say, we're at XYZ. Here's a problem. We've had to go here, timeline affected, that kind of stuff. and everybody gets the same information and it's all approved. Would solve a lot of the problems. So do we need to direct staff to drop something? Okay. I can make a motion that we direct staff to drop a communication strategy between the WHMB board and Wheatland County and the partnership area or the other municipalities as per the discussion today.
Between WHMB and each member municipality.
Yeah, because it'd have to be circulated. Everybody could have their input on it. We can create it. It'll change by the time it comes back, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think I would like to stress that I think one important piece on behalf of Wheatland County, from my perspective, is a correction of some of the misrepresentation of both our council position, as well as information that was presented around hard deadlines and things like that, that certainly created animosity and incited anger in the public that was not founded in reality. That's extremely frustrating that that occurred, and I think it's prudent that that be corrected, and because it came from the Wheatland Housing Management Body Board and the Wheatland and Area Hospice Society, I do think it's important that it come from those bodies jointly, as well as the public presentations were put on by those organizations. And again, I'll recognize and I respect their autonomy as organizations, but I think it's important to also remember that while they're autonomous, they're made up of multiple municipalities that do have responsibilities to the people that elected us, and that should be respected as well. And I feel that that has not been the case whatsoever. So Deputy Reeve Clausen, you made a motion. Any questions or discussion on the motion? And is that motion enough for administration?
Yes, and our expectation, does council, just so I have expectation management, would that letter come back to council prior to sending? So come back in August at the August 15th meeting?
I think it would be good for council to review.
I would tend to agree, and I don't believe at this point there is a firm timeline. It's just more of let's just make sure that everyone is willing to get on the same page to move forward, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, even when you look at this project update, and again, respecting the autonomy of the WHMB, but even when I look at like an efficiency perspective, from my perspective, this isn't saying a lot that wasn't already publicly available in the, in the newspaper and through prior social media communication and that type of thing. So I was a little bit concerned that a special meeting was called to approve this, particularly given the fact that it was made known by our representatives that we did have a council meeting today, and that was also raised in that board meeting and disregarded. And there was really, from my perception, unless I've missed something, there's really been zero initiative on behalf of the WHMB board to collaborate on communication, which, given that it's publicly available, that's a condition of our letter of support, I think is important for the board to contemplate. I appreciate the motion that's on the floor. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Councillor Custer and Councillor Lawerson, I was unclear how you voted. Okay. Motion is carried. It's 1:06, and I apologize to our 1 o'clock appointment.
Should we just make a motion?
Oh, and to accept his information.
I'll go ahead and move that council accept the Wheatland Housing Management Body joint announcement letter as information.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Takes teamwork. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. I will just ask if councillors can please vote clearly, just so it's easier to for me to determine if a motion is carried or not. Motion is carried. And we will now move to our 1 o'clock appointment, which is under FOIP Section 16, disclosure harmful to a business interest of a third party. And I will move us into closed session. We'll call the meeting back to order. There's motions arising from the closed session.
I think council will need a motion to move out of camera as well.
I did.
Oh, did you?
we were in
Okay, sorry.
closed session.
Okay.
Yep, no, that's okay. Thank you. Motion was passed to move out of closed session. I think, did we vote or did I not call it?
Oh, I think we did. I lift my hand up.
Yeah. Perfect.
I'll move that we accept Marcia Baima's presentation for the Cara Seniors Community as information.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll also move that to direct administration to help with communication on promoting and marketing information for the nonprofit organization.
For the Cara Seniors Community?
Cara Seniors Community, nonprofit.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'll also make a motion to bring an RFD to council on the potential servicing of the Cara Seniors Community.
For administration to bring an RFD back to
Yes.
council?
Yes.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. I believe that's all the motions arising from closed session. We'll move to agenda item 4.14.
Yes, good afternoon, Council. Brian from administration. On page 328 of your agenda package is just an RFD for an invitation to the MLAs of representing Wheatland County. So there are 3 returning MLAs and 1 new MLA. And this is just an opportunity for an informal or a formal introduction to council. So what I've done as well is just for council's information, I've also taken the resident count from our GIS system and just populated into this RFD just for information's sake. So just to kind of come up with a rough number of provincial constituents in each riding. So this number is just an estimate. Of course, there's different number of residents per household. This is just kind of a vague number throughout the county. And we've also created the draft letters to send out to the MLAs as well. One thing to consider as well after we did create this RFD was that there are a few public hearings on August 15th. So the De Havilland Field public hearing is set for 9 a.m. on that date. So we may, council may choose to move this meeting until the afternoon and potentially have lunch with the MLAs as well. Whatever council would like to do, I'm here to answer questions about the report. Thank you.
Any questions from council? I like the idea of extending an invitation to lunch and then moving into a more formal discussion, perhaps at 1 o'clock or something. And the only other thing is if we could just check styles of address. I think it would be honorable, Minister Schau. And I'm not sure for speaker and deputy speaker if there's titles. If we could just check and just make sure that our addresses are correct. Any other questions or comments?
This has got nothing to do with but I'm looking at these ridings, like the riding count at the bottom. And it doesn't seem possible. There's 465 residences in that little bit of an area.
Gleason.
Oh, the town of Gleason's in there. Okay.
Well, not a town anymore, but
Well, whatever.
the hamlet
The hamlet of Gleason. Okay. That,
and Nameka.
well,
is also-
I had Nameka there, but I did not know that it jogged over to Gleason. So, okay, that's all. Now that makes sense. I'm going, the numbers all add up to what there's in the county.
And we actually do have a map of the areas, and we're going to include in this RFD. I just we just couldn't get the mapping to work to but we'll provide that on the 15th.
Well, it's not, no, it makes perfect sense now, because I just thought it was just that little tip there.
You thought the nose only had
Yeah, the
makeup?
little nose there is what basically, yeah, but yes, okay.
Any other questions or discussion? And council's wishes? There is a recommended motion.
I'll move that council direct administration to draft the letter on behalf of the Reeve to send an invitation to the Wheatland County members of the Legislative Assembly to attend August 15th, 2023.
Perfect.
You guys
Do you
can work
want
on
to,
the dates.
At 1 p.m.?
administration does like
Whatever
a
works
time.
for you, because you might have to.
Oh, we'll do it for 1 p.m.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 4.21.
Good afternoon, Council. Tracy from Administration. I will just highlight a few items from my report to Council. I'll keep it very brief. At the last Council meeting, I believe, we discussed about incorrect mailing addresses. I did reach out to staff to get a little more information. So as of January to June 2023, approximately 426 envelopes were returned. We have done a lot of research and been very proactive, and we were able to remail 322 envelopes. So if you speak to any residents, please tell them the importance of sending in their form to Land Titles Office, because that is the only place that we really can take the change of address from. So in finance, we're contacting vendors who receive check payments and switching to EFT. Also in GIS, rural address signs have been assigned and ordered for every gravel pit site within Wheatland County. Again, just a good example of asset management. Reviewed the bridge inventory to ensure that citywide asset management software bridge inventory is correct. So that involved reviewing AT bridge mapping data, AT bridge raw data, county GIS data, county TCA data, and county corporate memory to ensure that all structures the county is responsible for managing are in asset management. So there's a lot of research, and we just want to be sure that we have everything in there. And last, just added wastewater network drawings to the plan as well. Are there any questions?
If no questions, perhaps a motion to accept for information.
I do have for the 100, there's about 100 that you couldn't find.
Mm-hmm.
Could those be sent, I don't know if this is allowed, by division to the counselor so that maybe they can, so that we know those are the people that you're looking for, to inform them about land titles? And either we can do it or they can just say that we can't, I don't know. We may have a different way of getting a hold of them than you will.
That's a very good question. Let me look into it, and then I can send an email to council maybe after the meeting. The first thing, of course, that pops into my mind is FOIP privacy. Yeah. But yeah, I can get back to you on that. We've certainly done our advertising. We've put it social media, the paper, the connector, the everywhere. So yeah.
Any other question? Any other questions?
I'll move that council accept the Corporate and Financial Services June 2023 report to council as information.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to 4.22.
Good afternoon, Council. Joel from Administration here to present insurance policy comparisons. I'll just briefly walk through some of the context here and summarize the report. This was done as a result of some of the discussions that Council has had about the use of personal vehicles in in business and whatnot, and the request to get some information from other municipalities and their policies around vandalism and insurance coverage and those kind of things. So in the report, we focused on 10 municipalities, as you can see on the screen here, that were outlined, and did some research on into their policies, and it's noted on the policy number and sections if they were relevant, or in some cases there was no policy in place. And so to summarize what we found, we kind of categorized them into 4 different criteria. One being that there was no policy or information that spoke to the insurability and how the municipality would even approach this situation. The second one was that there was a policy in place and that no additional costs for reimbursement would be provided to employees or council. And that it was the responsibility of the employees to ensure adequate coverage for their own insurance if they were going above and beyond that personal component into business use. The third category, which was really just the city of Calgary, is that they did have a policy in place, but it did not specifically state anything regarding the personal insurance coverage and whether it may or may not be covered in excess. And then the fourth was a policy was in place and that they did state that they would cover some additional liability. And then just kind of to summarize them, the interesting or main things that we found for those that had a policy is that for 3 of them that stated that they would not cover, they just explicitly noted that they assumed that to be part of the general reimbursement per kilometer rate. And then for the 2 that did state that they would cover, one of them, which was Strathcona County, said that it was just kind of a blanket or stated lump sum amount of $250 a year that's to cover various types of insurance that may be in additional cost. And then Clearwater County, they stated that they would cover, but they didn't actually have anything about a limit in their policy per se. So just kind of gives council a high level purview of some of the options and different approaches that we found that are out there in terms of insurability. Also, regarding specifically for vandalism, we noted on the bottom here, there was nothing really mentioned in any of the policies other than the city of Edmonton. Just they did cite that the mileage rate was to cover damage, which I suppose you could assume to be the same conceptually as vandalism, but the other policies didn't really mention vandalism per se. So that concludes kind of the summary, and staff are available for any questions.
Any questions for administration? Councillor Larson.
So just a point of clarification, when you've got in the policy summary paragraph, the 3rd bullet, Clearwater County has no limit, but rather will cover anything in excess of the employee's personal insurance. So if I'm understanding that correctly, because when I became a counselor, my personal insurance went up because I would be commuting to and from work. So if I'm reading this correctly, Strathcona would cover that additional premium that a person pays to use their vehicle for personal use, not specifically for vandalism of any type.
Yes, through the reeve, that would be my understanding of when I read through that policy as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions for administration? Council's wishes.
I'll move that council accept the report regarding insurance policy comparison as information.
Thank you, Councillor Eichert. Any questions or discussion?
Just discussion. I think maybe some of this could be, we're having the committee form for council remuneration. Some of this could be brought forward to that group, and maybe they can look at the different pays scales that we're getting for things. Because I mean, all of our costs have gone up substantially. Fuel has gone through the roof. Insurance costs have gone up crazy. So maybe that's something that they will address. But it is definitely, and then if you use your own personal insurance for this, it's going to be affected. So for me, I probably drive the oldest vehicle around here, so it doesn't really matter.
Jack got one older.
It's got yeah, it'd be improvement if it got vandalized. So
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. I will just make a comment. I had recused myself from discussions around this previously in case there was any pecuniary interest that resulted from the discussions. I'm glad that this will be settled. I do have personal insurance. Obviously, there's some uncertainty with what future consequences to that will be if we opt to have the damages repaired. This has just been a reminder of how polarized we are as a society and the lack of civility. Also, just the mental health instability and how angry somebody has to be to damage a mom van is pretty, it's actually concerning. And it's just an unfortunate consequence of public service. I don't think any of us are here for financial reasons. There would be no rationale for that. I think some of us have taken fairly substantive pay cuts to engage in public service, and it's important that we do have people willing to do that. It is just very unfortunate, and every time I open my passenger side door, it's a reminder of all of this. And it is just very, very unfortunate. My hope is that we will return to a higher degree of civility and just respect for those in public service, and that each of us can play a role in contributing to that increased civility rather than inciting hatred and polarization and anger against each other is my hope. And I'm glad that we can put this behind us, except for every time I walk around my van. Anyways, we will move to 4.31 Community and Development Services Report.
Good afternoon, Council. Sherry Bars with Community Development Services to provide the June report, which is found on page 343. And I really don't have anything additional to add to it at this time. Thank you.
Any questions regarding the report?
I'll make the motion that council accepts it as information.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 4.32. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council. Dave from Administration. On page 351 of your agenda package is a report for a request from the Lakes of Muirfield Homeowners Association for a sign project. They submitted this request to Council for consideration for funding for this entrance sign project. A breakdown of the project details, and the Appendix A shows the samples of the signs. Relevant practices, the Speargrass Community Association secured CURB funding in 2019 for a similar kind of project, and I'm available for any questions the council may have.
Any questions regarding the RFD? Deputy Reeve Claus.
No question to staff, but comment to council. To me, I look at this as, I've attended the HOA meetings, they've talked about this, they put the money in the budget to do this. To me, I look at this as, this is where we should put our developer hat on, because those signs were put in there by the developer before their HOA was ever around, to develop and encourage the growth in that area. They've incorporated some of our logos into the signage and stuff. They are, the meeting I was asked, there wasn't a complete ask for the that amount of budget. They were looking for roughly half or up to 10,000. And I know we have money that we've set aside from lot sales. To me, that is where I'd like to see that money come from. And that's, so I totally agree with this. We shouldn't be, in a normal situation, we would go through the other funding models, but we are a developer of this area as well. And we've had money set aside for things like this. This is, if you look on the pictures, it's all on the boulevard leading into it. The signage was really old and was cracking. They took it upon themselves to come up with a plan, and got some really nice signage coming. They've actually pulled them down. The entrance into there, they look after the flowers. They do all their own stuff on their own. So I think it's beneficial for us as the area developer to have that area looking nice. Whether or not we choose to develop anything further, we still, it's an entranceway into one of our communities that we can honestly say we own. So with that, I don't know how to make this motion. I'd make a motion that council funds 10,000 out of that fund? What is it? Mr. Henderson, I can't remember the
The Muirfield Reserve Fund.
Muirfield Reserve Fund, with that in mind.
Questions or discussion on the motion?
This is where, and I think this, I think I'll have to bring up, this has to be a discussion in the committee of the whole, that we have hamlets, and this has been my bugbear since I've been on council, that we have hamlets competing against other municipalities for curb funding. The last curb funding, they do a great job. 31% of the funding, the funds went to Standard and Rockyford, of which percentage of that are their own municipalities, should be their own coverage. When I have my community, when I have my hamlet, when I have my community hall, get less modernization money than Rockyford's community hall, Rockyford deserves that money. But my hamlet, which pays taxes directly to the county, deserves to have access to a set of funds that are not, that should be fought along amongst the hamlets, because there's a difference between the hamlets and the villages, and there always will be a difference between that. So I agree with what, I think this should be all paid out of, I would go for the whole $16,000, because we have the reserve fund for that. But I'm just against the fact that our hamlets have to compete against everybody on CERB funding, and there should be a separate, we have to figure out a way, there's got to be a separate fund, because this is going to be, if we don't do this, then we're going to start losing community halls, because we cannot, we've only got to, when we're commuting, when our hamlets are competing against the villages, that's just less money for the hamlets. So I'll wait for you to make your decision, and then I'm going to just ask that we have a discussion on committee of the whole to figure out whether or not, if there should not be another funding model for hamlets.
If available, does staff have the amounts in that budget right now, just a rough amount?
Yes, I can confirm that number. Just give me 1 second, actually, sorry.
Another question along those lines, was that money kind of intended for this purpose or some other purpose like servicing, providing services, or was it meant for recreation? Like, was there an idea of how the Lakes of Muirfield Reserve was to be?
So we, through the REEV, we have so the Lakes of Muirfield Reserve is as of December 31st, 2022, and it hasn't changed materially since then, but it's just over 8 million, so 8,057,200. And to answer the second question, is that we do have a policy in place for that reserve, and it is under section 2. And it's 2.9.35 Lakes of Muirfield Reserve on page 88, and I can just read the purpose of the reserve for council. This reserve is intended to ensure that the funds are available for capital costs such as infrastructure, equipment, facility upgrades, and improvements.
So my other comment is about the fact that we already have a signage committee. This is being brought forward by a separate, well, I guess, yeah, and Speargrass was the same. It was like a community-led initiative for signage that isn't the same as our Wheatland County signage. Do we want to have consistency in our, like, I love them. They look lovely. I do. But should we have a consistent signage throughout the county, or do we not care?
I believe the hamlet signage coming out in the future with our bigger signs, smaller versions of them. I think every hamlet will have a small one like that. This is within their own banners within there. And they just have our logo as part of it. I believe they've worked with yourself a little bit on this, or some of our staff. I think we're talking back and forth with them.
Yes, administration has been working with them.
So it's not something that it's been past the sniff test and very palatable, I guess. But yeah, they are committed to doing, and the HOA does have funds. They have enough funds to do this project on their own, but I feel this strongly that this is something that we should, as the rep, just because we own it, we are the developer of the area. A developer would have probably chipped in for this because it also helps the area.
So I was just going to say that Speargrass does have a developer and they refused to go at the time.
I know different hamlets.
Councillor Custer, yeah.
I know different hamlets have had to cover their own signages. I'm just curious, did Merrifield put in for curb funding for this? So they didn't put in for it, they're not going to get any, that's for sure. And also, when we become the developer of the area, one of our my major consideration of that time was to get a sanitary waste system put in. Hence, that was a major consideration of starting a reserve fund, putting all lot sales in there to get that done. And I'm not sure, but did we they have a subsidized sewage handling fee? Does that come out of that reserve or does that come out of general revenue?
So the current cost of wastewater in every hamlet is subsidized. So Muirfield would be subsidized more. The costs, I just don't know off the top of my head. And that's because just the process required. It goes to Dalleroy, we pick it up in a truck and we haul it down to Carsland. So all rates for wastewater and water across the county now are uniform. There could be a few levies here and there that, such as long-term debt. And I think there might be another one I just can't think of off the top of my head, but they're all uniform now. So that subsidy would just come through general revenue.
Okay. So I'd be careful, leery of spending that reserve money on other projects until we get that sewer thing. Because we are the developer, we got to get that done. And that's how developers pay for it, through the lot sales. And that's probably why there is no sewage there, because it wasn't done.
So we do currently have a motion on the floor for council to fund $10,000 out of the Muirfield Reserve Fund for the proposed sign project for the Lakes of Muirfield. There's been good discussion on both sides of the question. Deputy Reeve Clausen.
I could easily make the argument that that $10,000 could be easily made in insurance, or sorry, in the word I'm looking for, interest in a year on $8 million. I'm pretty sure it would be close to that. So I have no problem supporting it. I'll let the question stand as it is. Let council vote how they may.
Yeah, I do think that I was disappointed that Speargrass did not participate in the funding of the signs that they made, but I still think they should have. And now we have a new developer, so I'm hoping that they will in the future help out the community. Because I think they should.
Any other questions or discussion? I do think it's important to delineate just the unique role that we play with the Lakes of Muirfield development. It is different than really any other community in the county, just because of how we did assume that developer role, and because we are collecting revenue off of those lot sales. I do agree that the wastewater solution needs to be prioritized, and I think we have a fairly substantive fund established for that. I'm mindful of just $10,000 will not significantly hinder the implementation of the wastewater system. We don't have costing on that yet, to analyze on how that reserve will address the wastewater servicing solution. That will be forthcoming. But I am just mindful of the scale of this spend and just on the importance of maintaining, the beauty and the marketing of that community as the developer. So I will support this, and I like that it's sort of a concession. There's still the, it's also being supported by the HOA. So it's sort of a compromise. I appreciate that. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried.
Being that we're talking about development of Muirfield, I would like to ask administration, and I'll put a motion to support this, to bring something back to committee of the whole, to give council direction for the municipality or for the area development. Several people have asked me, what are we doing there? Is the county going to proceed and develop new lots? I think this council means to make that decision and either put forward an idea that we're going to market it to somewhere else because there is interest there. And if a developer wants to, we need to make that decision. Are we going to keep it? Are we going to do it? Because it's stalling and people want to know. And I just said I would bring it forward, and I thought this is a perfect time. If you want me to do a notice of motion for that, I can. Whatever council prefers. I just thought it'd be something we could discuss at committee of the whole, give staff some direction and have some direction for the community as well. Which would you?
If no one objects, perhaps you want to just put a motion to add it to the committee of the whole agenda, if nobody objects to that addition.
I'll put a motion forward to administration that the next committee of the whole, we bring Muirfield future development for council discussion.
Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
I'd like to motion forward that administration at the next committee of the whole, we just have a discussion on a Hamlet funding. If there's another way that we can have Hamlet funding that it isn't competing with other municipalities and that kind of stuff. So is that a doable thing?
Yep.
Just a discussion.
Any questions on the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
We'll move to 4.33.
Good afternoon, Council. Dave from administration. On page 361 of your agenda package is a report for budget adjustment on Wheatland Shores Campground. In 2023, the capital budget for Eagle Lake land improvements project was approved in the amount of $55,000. The name has changed for the campground. As we work through some of the deficiencies and inspections of the facilities out there, the recommendation was to remove the picnic shelter because of structural issues, both on the roof and some of the main support poles on that building. There was other startup issues with electrical and some frozen water lines that had to be replaced and fixed. So working through that, there is the proposal for an increased budget of $30,000 to take care of these outstanding items to complete the list that we had for those repairs and improvements. And I'm available for any questions.
Any questions regarding the report?
There's sort of an ongoing budget for that campground for next year also, like there's a budget for that the county is putting into the public area in there.
Yes, there's going to be a budget item, operational budget each year that hasn't been put in yet, but the plan is to put that in for 2024 and future years.
Approximate cost of that?
We really originally talked about 10 grand, but that we might have to add that a little bit more as we're going through things. We found some electrical services for some of the not up to code and need some work, and just some other items, roofing, some other items. So we'll have a better understanding and a full report for that operational budget, what those will be. But I'm thinking in the 10 to 15 kind of thousand range, not too much more than what we had originally discussed.
Okay, and then there won't be like a $30,000 ask on top of that, $10,000 or $15,000 next year for unforeseen, because we're just sort of we're trying to catch up now, and then once we're caught up, then it'll just
exactly. That's exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding the RFD?
I'll make a motion that council approves an increase to the 2023 capital Eagle Lake Land Improvements project budget from $55,000 to $85,000 and change the project name to Wheatland Shores Campground Land Improvements.
Any questions or discussion on the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 4.41.
Good afternoon, Council. Brad Bullock reporting on the June Transportation and Agriculture Department report. I'll just touch on a few points throughout the report that's in the agenda. So in Rosebud, the Martin Avenue Stormwater Drainage Project has been completed. On page 365, in relation to the West Side Servicing Study, staff has received some technical information related to the potable water access request planned to go to the City of Calgary, and are now working on the letter and the request to send off to the city. Also with that study, using the information in hand, we're working with our planning and development team to prepare a request for proposals to complete a commercial industrial growth and demand study for the West Highway Industrial Park, which will help inform future plans for infrastructure and timing for those things. Operations scheduled for the standard waste transfer site was adjusted and came into effect on June 12th. So the site will now be closed on Fridays, and the new schedule is 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. The structural reviews of the Nameka Hall, Galician Library, Galician Water Tower, and Clooney Hall was completed in the latter half of June, and the inspection report is planned to be submitted to the county mid-July. The Speargrass backwash pipe repair has been awarded, and we're currently awaiting supplier lead time before finalizing the work schedule. On page 366 is the section for agriculture and environment, some statistics there. Obviously, the Agricultural Service Board meeting is tomorrow, and so a lot of this information will be shared there as well. The Wheatland Watershed Resiliency and Restoration Program is open for applications from agricultural producers within the county, and additional information can be found on the county's website for anybody interested in looking at or applying for that program. Roadside mowing and spraying began the week of June 19th, as well as weed inspections in the villages are underway. And that concludes my report. At the tail end of the report, this is the detailed list of the various capital and operational projects being completed by county staff, and I'm here for any questions.
Any questions regarding the report? Councillor Priest.
Brad, I had a question. In my area, there's a gravel road that's aligned with that WID ditch that every spring gets, we spoke about this, gets so soft that farmers can't get equipment down it. I think Glenn had talked about one in his area too. I think there's a number around. You'd said that you were looking at a potential, some kind of a solution to help improve those situations for the spring. Can you kind of give me an idea of what that might look like, or if it's...
Yeah, so what our operations crews are doing there is looking at using some larger aggregate gravel and mulching, essentially I'm going to say mulching that into the top 6 to 12 inches of the road, just to give the road surface some more structural stability. And so it's just something that we're trialing right now with different sizes of aggregate as well to see what works. And if it works, hopefully it'll improve those conditions in the spring for those roads.
That's great. Thank you. It'd be good to just circle back to landowners.
I've seen some fair size.
Councillor Kester, if you can just use your microphone.
I've
and
seen
be close to it.
various pit run already put on that road, so be careful when you dig it up.
Any other questions or discussion regarding the report?
I'll move that council accepts the June 2023 Transportation and Agriculture Department report as information.
Thank you, Councillor Laprise. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Larson, did you vote? Oh, I did not see you raise your hand. Thank you. Motion is carried. We'll move to agenda item 4.42.
Afternoon, Council. Cody Zimmerman with Administration presenting the Dust Control Policy Update, RFD. Administration has reviewed the existing dust control policy. Following report just provides a summary of recommended changes to the existing policy. A full draft of the policy has been attached to the report along with the existing policy for reference. Administration completed a full comprehensive review of this policy just based off of some information gathering from what other municipalities are doing, and then feedback that we got from council from the February Committee of the Whole meeting. Upon approval, we'd recommend an implementation date of January of 2024, as we're currently following the existing policy for the 23 dust control season. And we'd want to basically get this in place so that we can budget and plan our resources accordingly for 2024. Instead of doing the typical green-red format on the policy, this was such a large change overall that we just kind of did a table format for you. Basically, to start off, we did some general policy provisions and just organized everything into about 4 main categories for different services that we provide within the county. Really just putting some clarity around those programs, deadlines, activities, or for when the activities will take place, and just to help everybody understand the timelines and resource planning along with that. One of the first major categories that we defined was county operational activities. So basically just some conciseness and flexibility within the policy around when and where we will apply dust control for county operations, getting rid of any unnecessary language and just clarifying things, making it more clear for everybody. So the second category was dust control in hamlets. We just felt that this kind of needed its own category, as it's it covers off a lot of ratepayers, and it's not a huge cost to our program, but just having some clarity around that for when and where. The third category would be dust control on high traffic volume roads. As council is aware, this was kind of one of the more hot topic issues, I guess. As we know, dust is always a hot topic issue within the county. So we want to provide some clarity around that program and how it would be rolled out into the future, which wasn't defined very well in the old policy. So the new program would be dust control for all residences within 200 meters of a gravel road that had a traffic count of 100 cars or more per day. And then just some clarity around how we would be determining that and performing traffic counts and when, and adding roads to the program. I will go over some budget information in regards to that section specifically in a little bit here, because it does impact the budget for that program. And then the last category that we covered here is the purchase dust control program. And that's not really a huge change on that front, still implementing things the way we have been, but again, just clarifying dates, application times, things of that nature. Also adding in a warranty period for spray applied dust control, just so we can kind of put some more definition around when and where we will be reapplying and warranting dust controls and things of that nature. Again, just operational efficiencies on that front. So, and then there were some sections that we are recommended to be completely removed. One of them being dust control by non-county workforces for gravel hauls. That's specifically related to the CAP program and how that would roll out. Required council approval for spending, so it wasn't really being utilized very well. So we just are proposing to strike that whole section. And then dust control in towns and villages by county workforces. Again, just removing this section as we felt that it was covered within an existing county policy that detailed work for other municipalities. That it's already laid out very clearly and again requires council resolution and agreement with that municipality. So no need for it in this policy. And then dust control by dust control applied by non-county workforces. This is just basically a single clause, been reduced down within the policy, as that's mostly managed through the AWAs, all the agreements, insurance, things of that nature. So again, just a quick reference. And that basically covers the big changes. Now in regards to the county-funded dust control program for high-volume roads. I know it's a mouthful, but it's the most concise way we could get to put it in there. So, so the operational costs have been laid out in the table that were provided in the report. 2023 numbers are based off of dust control requests that we got through that program over for 2023. They're kind of all over to the county, so the price for each of those is a lot higher than it would be as a part of the actual program because of the efficiencies we can gain by doing whole roads and knowing where we're going, as opposed to bounce around and doing one-offs. So those costs for each one individually, you'll notice, will be a little higher for 23. We've also looked at what we have planned for MRO and seal coat and things coming into the future here and provided just a breakdown of how we expect this program to roll out over the next few years with roads that'll be taken off because of different surfacing and things going on. And then we provided a map just at the end of the report that would identify those roads that we know about so far within the program. And there might be some slight changes based off of the 2023 traffic counts, but I don't think it'll impact the numbers too greatly from what we're seeing. So that concludes my report, and I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions regarding the proposed updated policy? Councillor Kester?
Will any of these roads, will it require banning?
Through the chair, no, we wouldn't intend to ban any of the roads. It would just be a calcium spray 120 meters in front of each residence, generally centered on the residents more or less. So we wouldn't implement any bans at all.
I'll make the motion that council approve the revision to policy 9.4.3 dust control as attached to this report with a revised policy to be implemented starting January 1, 2024.
Thank you, Deputy Ruth Clausen. Any questions or discussion? Councillor Kester?
I didn't read it all, but would we still be maintaining individual residents that request dust control? Be it MRO or the same thing we're doing now?
Yes, through the chair, we would still be selling calcium and MRO at the continued subsidized rate that we have been for those people.
Any other questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you for bringing that forward. It was a substantive amount of work and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Bigger said it's her favorite topic. She's going to be sad if we don't get to address it all the time. We're going to move to agenda item 5.1. We just have one piece of correspondence. No action required. Council's wishes. I shouldn't say no action required. We are doing letters to our MLAs. I don't know. Would council consider a letter to Minister McIver, just given the close work that we do with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs? I would move.
Him to our meeting or what?
Or just congratulating him and
Yeah.
maybe just referencing that we're looking forward to working with him or something like that.
Ask him the next time he's in Chestermere to stop out for a visit and a beer.
Couldn't resist.
I would move that council direct administration to draft a letter from the Reeve on behalf of council, congratulating Minister McIver on his appointment to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and indicating that we're looking forward to working together. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. And then perhaps just a motion to accept as information.
I move that council accept the following items as information as provided in the request for decision. Minister McIver correspondence dated June 20th, 2023.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Any questions or discussion? All in favor? Motion is carried. I will move us into closed session to address two matters. The addition to the agenda, provincial advocacy for interchange,